Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, a space where curiosity finds its comfort and science takes you by the hand instead of rushing ahead. Tonight, we're not looking up at the stars or puzzling over the ticking of clocks. Instead, we're heading downward, into the most mysterious and least understood place on Earth. A place so close, yet so unknown, that it might as well be another planet. The deep ocean, the abyss. And what waits there is a question that humankind has been whispering to itself for centuries. What monsters still hide in the abyss? Now, when I say monsters, I don't mean the kind that lurk under your bed or creep in old fairy tales. I mean the living, breathing creatures of the deep. Some so bizarre that even when captured on camera, they look like designs from the imagination of a restless child. Some so large that their very existence kept alive myths of sea dragons and krakens for centuries. Others so small yet so alien that they look more at home in a science fiction film than in our planet's waters. These are monsters not in the sense of evil, but in the sense of the unknown, the extraordinary, the unsettling forms that life can take when it is sculpted by total darkness, crushing pressure, and isolation from the world above. Before we begin our slow descent, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from tonight? Is there water near you? A river, a lake, maybe the sea? Or are you landlocked, surrounded by fields, mountains, or city streets? Wherever you are, picture for a moment the nearest ocean. Now imagine standing on its shore at night. You hear the steady hush of waves. You feel the cool air on your face. You see almost nothing but darkness ahead. That dark horizon hides a world larger than all the continents combined, and below its surface lies a depth where light has never touched, a realm where life has shaped itself into forms we still struggle to understand. That is the stage for tonight's quiet journey. If you find this exploration soothing, or it helps you drift after a long day, I would be grateful if you left a like or subscribed. It lets this little corner of calm reach others who might also enjoy wondering about what lies beneath. Now, let's continue downward. Because somewhere beyond the reach of sunlight, in waters where no diver can swim unaided, lies the question we're here to ask. What monsters still hide in the abyss? It begins with perspective. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth's surface, and yet more than 80% of it remains unexplored. Think about that. We have better maps of the Moon and Mars than we do of the seafloor beneath our own oceans. Satellites can trace broad outlines, but the fine details, the canyons, the ridges, the hidden valleys, those are still a mystery. The abyss is not just deep, it is vast, and in that vastness, entire ecosystems can thrive unseen. Entire species can live and die without us ever knowing they existed. When we speak of the deep ocean, we usually mean depths beyond 200 meters. At that point, sunlight fades rapidly until it disappears completely. Below 1,000 meters there is only darkness, and this zone, stretching down to nearly 11,000 meters in the deepest trenches, is the true abyss. Here the pressure is unimaginable, more than 1,000 times the weight you feel at the surface. Temperatures hover just above freezing. Food is scarce, yet life is not absent. In fact, it's thriving in forms that push the boundaries of biology. For centuries, people imagined sea monsters rising from these depths, not entirely out of superstition, but out of glimpses, half-truths, and encounters with strange beings hauled up in nets. Fishermen reported creatures with teeth like daggers, bodies as long as ships, eyes the size of shields. Many of those stories were exaggerations, but not all. Some of them hinted at real animals we only confirmed much later, like the giant squid, once dismissed as sailors' fantasy, now known to patrol the dark mid-waters of the world's oceans. The idea of monsters in the abyss persists because even today, so much of it is uncharted. Every time we send cameras or submersibles down, we see something that challenges our assumptions about what life can look like. Picture the descent. From the bright shallows where corals glow and fish dart in rainbow colours, you sink lower and the light fades. The The water grows colder. Shapes become shadows. At 200 meters, the last hints of sunlight vanish. By 500 meters, you're in near total blackness. By 1,000, the only light is bioluminescence, the glow produced by the creatures themselves. Tiny sparks, steady pulses, sudden flashes, like stars in a watery night sky. You're entering the kingdom of the abyss. This realm does not welcome humans. Our bodies are not built for the pressure, our lungs are not built for the lack of oxygen, and our eyes are useless in the dark. Yet machines have allowed us glimpses. Submersibles with thick hulls, cameras designed to withstand crushing weight, drones that slip silently through the black water. Each time we look, we find something new. Sometimes small, like a shrimp with transparent skin. Sometimes massive, like a shark longer than a car. Sometimes unearthly, like a jellyfish with glowing organs that pulse like lanterns. The word monster, of course, carries weight. It implies fear, danger, something to be avoided. But the monsters of the abyss are not villains. They are survivors. Their bodies tell stories of adaptation, of creativity, of millions of years spent perfecting ways to live in a place where life should not be possible. Some have jaws that can unhinge to swallow prey almost as large as themselves, because in a world where food is scarce, you cannot be picky. Some have teeth so sharp and thin they look like needles, perfectly designed to trap anything that comes close. Others have bodies so gelatinous that they collapse if brought to the surface, built only for the pressure of the deep. And then there is the scale. Some abyssal creatures are small beyond belief, barely visible, drifting like dust. Others are giants, scaled up in ways that defy expectation. The colossal squid, the largest invertebrate known, with eyes the size of dinner plates, deep-sea isopods that look like oversized pill bugs, scuttling across the seafloor, sharks that live for centuries in the cold darkness, their lifespans stretching longer than entire civilizations. Each of these could be called a monster, simply because they remind us of how small and fragile we are. Humans, of course, have always projected stories onto the sea. Ancient sailors believed in leviathans that could swallow ships whole. Norse mythology spoke of Jörmungandr, the world's serpent coiled around the oceans. Polynesian myths told of Taniwha, guardians of deep waters. Even now, films and novels draw on the ocean's mysteries to craft creatures both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Yet behind every myth, there is often a kernel of truth. Giant squids mistaken for dragons, whales misidentified as serpents, unknown shadows magnified by fear and imagination. The abyss gave rise to these legends because it is the one place humans cannot easily go. It resists exploration. And when we cannot see clearly, we invent stories to fill the dark. The monsters still hiding in the abyss are both real and imagined. Real, because we keep discovering new species every year, some large, some microscopic, each stranger than the last. Imagined, because our minds will always create more than reality can provide, turning shadows into titans, flickers of light into ghostly apparitions. Yet the line between real and imagined is thinner in the deep sea than anywhere else on Earth. We cannot say with certainty what waits below, only what we have seen so far. And what we have seen is enough to keep the word monster alive, though not always in fear, sometimes in wonder. Think of it like this. The abyss is Earth's final frontier. Space captures our imagination because it is distant and vast, but the deep ocean is right here, beneath our feet, wrapped around our continents, shaping our climate, feeding our world. And yet, we know almost nothing about it. Every expedition has the potential to reveal something new, a new predator, a new ecosystem, even a new way of thinking about life itself. When we ask what monsters still hide in the abyss, we're really asking what mysteries remain, what truths we have not yet uncovered, what life looks like when forced into conditions that seem impossible. And so, as we set out on this journey together, keep that question close. What monsters still hide in the abyss? Not monsters to fear, but monsters to learn from, creatures that defy expectation and remind us that our planet is far stranger and more wonderful than we usually remember. In the depths, there are jaws that snap in silence, eyes that glow in the dark, bodies that drift like ghosts, and beings we may not even have names for yet. Each of them waits, not for us, but simply because they are there, living their lives in a world apart. And we, curious and restless, will always want to know what they are. The curtain of the deep has been drawn back just a little. The question has been asked. And as we continue, we will look more closely at the abyss itself, at what makes it such a unique and challenging environment, and why life there takes the forms it does. When people talk about wilderness, they usually picture forests that stretch for miles without a road in sight, or deserts where sand rolls endlessly to the horizon, or mountain ranges where snow and silence dominate everything else. Those are wildernesses certainly, but compared to the ocean, they are small. The deep sea is the last great wilderness on Earth, not because it is untouched by humans, but because it is still beyond our reach in ways that no other place can match. We have walked to the poles, we have crossed deserts, we have climbed mountains, but the abyss keeps most of its secrets hidden, not out of malice, but simply because it is too vast, too dark, and too hostile for us to ever fully tame. The scale of it is the first thing worth grasping. More than 70% of Earth is covered in water, and the average depth of that water is almost 4 kilometers. That means if the entire planet were flattened and smoothed, the whole Earth would be covered by an ocean nearly 2 miles deep. The seafloor itself is not a flat plain, but a landscape of canyons, trenches, seamounts and ridges, more dramatic than anything on land. The Mariana Trench alone is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you dropped the highest mountain into that trench, the summit would still be nearly 2 kilometers underwater. Imagine that. A mountain so tall it scrapes the sky on land, swallowed whole by an oceanic gash that runs invisible under the waves. This is the scale of wilderness we're speaking of. For centuries, maps showed the oceans as blank spaces. Even when cartographers filled them with illustrations of serpents or dragons, it was an admission of ignorance more than a claim of knowledge. We didn't know what lay beneath, so we filled the unknown with imagination. Today our maps are better, drawn with satellites and sonar, but they're still incomplete. Entire mountain ranges have been found by accident while towing equipment across the Pacific. Volcanic vents have been discovered only because submersibles stumbled upon them, and every time one of these features is revealed, it reshapes our understanding of Earth itself. This wilderness is not just unexplored, it is actively rewriting what we think we know about geology, biology and climate. What makes it wilderness is not simply the lack of human presence, though that is true enough. It is that the deep ocean resists our usual ways of knowing. On land, we explore by walking, climbing, surveying. We can breathe the air, see the path, carry our supplies. In the ocean, every meter downward requires technology. Every minute spent below depends on machines that can break, that can fail under pressure. And the pressure is the defining force. At just a few hundred meters, the weight of the water is enough to crush human lungs. At thousands of meters, the pressure would flatten steel. Submersibles are built with spheres of thick titanium, small enough to hold only a handful of people, designed to resist the crushing weight. Yet even then, the risk remains. To travel into the abyss is to enter an alien wilderness, one where the rules of survival are utterly different from our own. But wilderness is not only about scale or danger, it is about absence. The absence of noise, the absence of light, the absence of human footprints. In the deep sea, light disappears completely around 1,000 meters. Beyond that, there is only bioluminescence, the glow created by living creatures themselves. Entire ecosystems are lit not by the sun but by organisms flashing, pulsing, glowing in patterns that serve as lures, warnings, or secret signals. Imagine walking through a forest where every plant and animal glowed instead of the sun rising. That is the wilderness of the abyss. Food, too, is scarce. Most life depends on energy from the sun, but in the deep sea there is none. Instead, the food arrives as what scientists call marine snow, a slow drizzle of organic material falling from the surface, dead plankton, fish scales, bits of plants, fecal pellets, everything that dies or drifts above eventually sinking. This snow is constant but sparse, and for creatures of the deep, it is often the only source of sustenance. To survive, they must adapt to scarcity. Mouths gape wide, jaws unhinge, stomachs stretch, bodies conserve energy by moving slowly, almost lazily. This is a wilderness not of abundance but of careful economy, where every meal might be the last for weeks. And yet life persists here in staggering diversity. The abyss holds fish with transparent heads, crabs that scuttle across hydrothermal vents, worms that build colonies around chemical plumes, and jellies that drift with arms like ribbons. Some animals live for centuries in the cold darkness, their lifespans longer than many civilizations. Others are born, live and die in spans so short we can barely study them. This diversity is why the abyss is called the last wilderness. It is not just emptiness, it is full of life we barely understand, thriving in conditions that would kill us instantly. When people speak of wilderness on land, they often mean something we could, in theory, cross. A jungle might be vast, but with time and effort we could cut a path through it. A desert might be unforgiving, but with enough supplies we can traverse it. The deep sea is different. We cannot cross it by foot. We cannot breathe its air because it has none. We cannot survive its weight without armour of steel. It is not a place we can ever truly inhabit. At best, we visit briefly with machines and then return to the surface. That inaccessibility makes it the truest wilderness, because it is not ours and never will be. And still, we are drawn to it. Expeditions continue, submersibles dive, cameras descend on long cables, satellites trace the surfaces, ships drag sensors across its vastness. We send our technology into the dark, hoping to glimpse something we've never seen. Each time, we find creatures that feel impossible. A fish with a lure growing from its head, a jellyfish with bells like UFOs, a shark that glides through the blackness older than our nations. The wilderness gives up its secrets reluctantly, but it does give them, and each revelation deepens the mystery. This last wilderness also shapes our lives in ways we rarely think about. The oceans regulate climate, absorb carbon, and produce much of the oxygen we breathe. The deep currents move heat around the planet, stabilizing weather patterns. Hydrothermal vents at the seafloor recycle minerals that fuel ecosystems both in the sea and on land. Even if we never see it, the abyss sustains us. Wilderness is not just about being remote. It is about being essential, hidden yet vital. It is also fragile. For all its scale, the abyss is vulnerable. Deep-sea mining threatens to scrape ancient seafloor ecosystems that took millions of years to form. Plastic waste has been found in trenches deeper than Everest is tall. Fishing nets drag along the bottom, destroying habitats before we even know what lives there. This wilderness is not immune to our reach. It is simply harder to see the damage. That is why speaking of the abyss as the last wilderness is both wonder and warning. It remains wild, but not untouched. And still, when we think of monsters in the abyss, it is this wilderness that creates them. The creatures are not monstrous on their own. They are products of their world. In a wilderness where darkness rules, they grow eyes that glow or vanish altogether. In a wilderness where food is scarce, they grow mouths that can engulf prey larger than themselves. In a wilderness where pressure crushes bone, they grow bodies of jelly, flexible enough to withstand it. Every monster is really a story told by the wilderness itself, a reminder that life bends into whatever shape survival requires. To call the abyss the last great wilderness is not exaggeration. It is a recognition that here, more than anywhere else, life has evolved apart from us. It has followed its own path, unshaped by human hands, in silence and darkness for millions of years. When we look into it, we are not just exploring, we are witnessing. We are seeing life that does not need us, life that will continue long after us, life that shows how vast and varied this planet truly is. That is the wilderness of the abyss, and as we sink further into it, the question of monsters remains. For if the wilderness is so vast and so little of it explored, what else waits there? What shapes, what sizes, what hungers, what lights in the dark? The last great wilderness is not just about what we know, it is about what we do not, and that is where the monsters still hide. When you picture life on Earth, you probably think of sunlight first. The warmth on your skin on a summer day, the way plants stretch toward it, the cycle of dawn and dusk guiding our lives. For most of the living world, sunlight is the foundation. It feeds the plants feed the animals, and everything else follows from that simple exchange. But the abyss is a world cut off from sunlight entirely. Below about 1,000 meters, not a single ray of natural light penetrates. It is a place of permanent midnight, a place where darkness is not just an absence, but the basic condition of existence. And yet, against what seems impossible, life has made a home there. Darkness, when we think of it on land, often carries fear. In the dark we stumble. In the dark our imagination invents threats. But in the deep sea, darkness is not threatening. It is normal. It is the background against which every creature is designed. Their bodies, their behaviours, their very survival strategies are built for a life where sight is limited or even useless. The first thing to understand about making a home in the abyss is that vision takes a back seat. Some animals abandon eyes entirely. In caves on land, blind fish swim in pools where light never reaches, and the same is true in the deep sea. If there is nothing to see, why waste energy maintaining eyes? Other creatures keep eyes, but shrink them or adapt them to detect only the faintest glimmers of bioluminescence. Still others go the opposite route, developing enormous eyes relative to their body, lenses wide enough to catch even a single photon of light drifting in the black. To live in darkness, life has diversified its ways of sensing the world, but sight is not the only option. Many abyssal creatures navigate through touch and vibration. They feel the movement of water, the faint currents, the disturbances that signal the approach of prey or predator. Some have long filaments trailing from their bodies, functioning like whiskers, extended senses reaching out into the void. Others rely on smell, detecting faint traces of chemicals drifting on the currents, the underwater equivalent of scent trails. In darkness, information is precious, and creatures evolve whatever tools allow them to gather it. And then there is light, but not sunlight. In the abyss, the only glow comes from within. Bioluminescence is perhaps the most iconic adaptation of deep-sea life. Tiny organisms produce their own light through chemical reactions. Some use it to lure prey, dangling glowing lures like fishermen in reverse. The anglerfish, with its grotesque jaw and glowing rod, is the best-known example. Others use light as camouflage, glowing on their undersides to match the faint residual light from above, hiding their silhouette from predators below. Still others flash in sudden bursts, startling attackers, or release glowing clouds like underwater smoke screens to confuse an escape. Imagine living in a world where light is not given by the sun but created by those who need it, turned on and off like a secret signal. That is how darkness becomes home. Food, as always, shapes life here too. In darkness, there is no photosynthesis. The base of the food web shifts. Instead of plants, it begins with the slow rain of marine snow from above, with carcasses of whales sinking to the bottom, with the occasional fish unlucky enough to drift down. Life in the abyss must be opportunistic. Mouths gape wide, teeth curve inward like prison bars, Stomachs expand like balloons. Some fish can swallow prey larger than themselves, because the next chance to eat might be weeks away. To us, these features look monstrous. To the animals, they are simply survival in a home where meals are scarce. There are also places where food comes not from above, but from within the earth itself. Hydrothermal vents and cold seeps create oases in the abyss, where chemical energy replaces sunlight. Here, bacteria convert chemicals like hydrogen sulfide into energy, forming the base of entire ecosystems. Around them cluster tube worms longer than a human, clams with symbiotic bacteria in their gills, crabs and shrimp grazing on microbial mats. These vent communities are startling not just for their abundance, but for what they prove, that life does not need sunlight at all. It needs only a source of energy. In the darkness of the abyss, life has built thriving communities using the chemistry of the planet itself. But beyond adaptation, beyond biology, there is something else to consider. The abyss is not just a home for animals, it is also a home for stability. For billions of years, life on Earth has been tied to the cycles of light and dark on the surface, the changing of seasons, the rise and fall of temperatures. But in the deep ocean, those cycles barely matter. It is always dark. It is always cold. The seasons do not reach here. The storms do not penetrate. For creatures of the abyss, home is constancy. They live in conditions so stable that some of them may have changed little for millions of years. In that way, the darkness is not just a challenge, it is also a shelter. Humans often think of home as comfort, as familiarity. For abyssal creatures, home is defined by survival. The darkness is not a problem because they never knew light. The crushing pressure is not a burden because they were built for it. The scarcity of food is not a tragedy because they evolved to wait. We might see the abyss as hostile, but for them, it is simply life as it should be. Darkness is not an absence for them. It is the condition that makes their existence possible. The idea that darkness can be home also explains why the abyss continues to fascinate us. We are creatures of light. We rely on our vision. We follow the cycle of the sun. To imagine living without it feels impossible. And yet, billions of organisms do it every day. They live in a world we cannot inhabit, and they thrive there. That gap between our perception and their reality is what makes them seem monstrous. When you live in light, a creature of darkness looks like a nightmare. But from their perspective, we are the strange ones, soft and fragile, unable to survive without the sun. It is also worth remembering that this darkness is not empty. Sound travels farther underwater than in air, and the abyss is filled with it. The groans of shifting tectonic plates, the calls of whales that travel for thousands of kilometers, the snapping of shrimp, the faint hums of currents. To us, the abyss might seem silent, but to its inhabitants, it is alive with signals. Darkness does not mean stillness. It means a different kind of sensory world, one built on sound, vibration, and chemical cues. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. When darkness becomes home, life finds ways to see without sight, to eat without abundance, to glow without the sun. It is not a lesser world, not a broken one, but a different kind of normal. For every bizarre body plan we encounter, every glowing lure, every transparent head or needle-toothed jaw, there is an explanation rooted in adaptation. What we call monstrous is simply ordinary when darkness is all you have ever known. As we continue our descent into this world of black water and glowing sparks, it is worth pausing to ask what other shapes might have found their place here. If the abyss has already given us anglerfish with lanterns, jellyfish like floating chandeliers, worms living off the breath of the earth itself, what else is out there that we have not yet seen? The darkness hides not only what we know, but what we do not, and until we look closer, it will remain their home alone. When you live in a world where the sun never shines, the very idea of sight changes. On land, eyes are our most trusted sense. We rely on them more than anything else to move through our lives, to read, to drive, to recognize faces. In the abyss, though, eyes take on a different meaning. Some creatures give them up entirely, sinking into darkness without regret. Others build them larger than seems possible, stretched wide to capture even the faintest trace of a photon. Some invent their own light, and evolve eyes tuned to detect only the glow they themselves produce. To understand how life survives in the abyss, we have to ask what it means to have eyes that see without light. Consider first the simplest strategy, to have no eyes at all. For many creatures, sight is costly. Eyes need energy to grow and maintain. They need a brain capable of processing images. If there is no sunlight, those costs may outweigh the benefits. So in many parts of the deep ocean, fish and invertebrates are completely blind. Their heads are smooth, their faces featureless. They move by sensing vibrations in the water or chemical traces drifting past. Some burrow in the sediment, living entire lives without ever seeing. To us, this blindness seems like a limitation. To them, it is efficiency. Why waste energy on a sense that serves no purpose? But blindness is not the only option. Some deep-sea creatures develop eyes that are astonishingly large compared to their bodies. The giant squid is the most famous example, with eyes the size of dinner plates. These enormous lenses can detect the faintest glow, the flash of a distant bioluminescent animal, even the shadow of a predator moving far above. To imagine what this means, picture yourself in a field at night, looking for the flicker of a candle miles away. For these creatures, that is daily life. Their eyes are not just tools of sight, they are survival machines, capable of turning near total darkness into faint patterns of motion and light. Then there are creatures that seem almost alien in design. Some fish, like the barrelai, have transparent heads. Inside their skulls sit upward-facing eyes encased in a clear dome. These eyes are sensitive enough to track the faint silhouettes of prey against the dim glow of surface light, even from hundreds of meters below. When you look at them, they seem unreal. Eyes floating inside a glass dome, green orbs pointing upward like searchlights. And yet this bizarre arrangement works perfectly in the environment where they live. What looks grotesque to us is simply another way to see in darkness. Bioluminescence complicates things further. In the abyss, light is rare, but when it appears, it matters. Many animals evolve eyes tuned specifically to detect the wavelengths of blue and green light, most commonly produced by bioluminescence. Some can even distinguish subtle differences in shade, allowing them to identify whether a flash comes from prey, predator, or potential mate. Certain deep-sea shrimp and fish may even detect ultraviolet or polarized light, invisible to us, giving them information we cannot imagine. For them, the dark is not uniform. It is a patchwork of signals, each carrying meaning, each requiring specialized vision to interpret. But not all eyes look forward. In the deep, some fish develop tubular eyes pointing straight up, designed to scan for movement above while their bodies drift silently below. Others have eyes that rotate, capable of swiveling forward, upward, or sideways depending on need. Some animals carry multiple eyes, tiny clusters spread across their heads to maximize detection. These are not eyes built for beauty, not the complex irises of mammals or the compound sparkle of an insect. They are tools, stripped of ornament, honed for survival in darkness. And yet, even with these adaptations, vision in the abyss is always partial. No creature can see everything. Most are limited to detecting faint movements, flashes of light, vague shapes. The detail we take for granted on the surface, colours, textures, faces, does not exist here. When eyes see without light, they are not seeing in the way we understand. They are sensing change, detecting opportunity, avoiding danger. It is sight pared down to its essentials, stripped of anything unnecessary. Still, there is something remarkable about the fact that sight persists at all. Evolution could have done away with eyes entirely, yet again and again, it reinvents them, shapes them, enlarges them, tunes them to faint signals. This persistence tells us something important. Even in the abyss, light matters. However rare, however faint, those flashes of bioluminescence, those drifting silhouettes, carry enough information to be worth the cost of vision. A single glimpse might mean the difference between starvation and a full stomach, between life and sudden death. It is also worth thinking about what these eyes cannot see. They do not reveal the full landscape of the sea floor. They do not paint the abyss in detail. Instead, the creatures live in a world of fragments. A flicker here, a shadow there, a glow that might be a lure or might be food. Their perception of home is stitched together from pieces, never whole. To us, this seems like deprivation. To them, it is simply normal. They do not need to see everything, only enough to survive. Humans, by contrast, struggle in darkness. Our eyes adapt somewhat. We can dilate our pupils, we can rely on rods in our retinas, but we are limited. We stumble without artificial light. That is why when we descend into the deep sea with submersibles, we bring lamps brighter than car headlights. We flood the water with beams of white light, and in doing so, we change the very environment we're trying to study. Animals startled by the sudden brightness flee or behave differently. In our attempt to see, we distort what is natural. The eyes that see without light are far better suited than ours, but we cannot borrow them. We can only approximate, and in doing so, we are reminded again that this world is not built for us. Some of the most striking discoveries about deep-sea vision come from experiments bringing animals to the surface. Many cannot survive the journey intact, collapsing under the change in pressure. But the ones that do often reveal eyes strangely fragile, easily damaged by daylight. They are adapted for faintness, for subtlety. Expose them to the sun, and they are overwhelmed. It is a reminder that what works in one world fails in another. An eye that sees without light cannot survive in our brightness, just as our eyes cannot penetrate their dark. And yet, despite these differences, we are fascinated by their vision. We imagine what it must be like to see in flashes, to live in a world lit only by sparks of life, to interpret a faint glow as opportunity or threat. Science can measure their sensitivity, their wavelengths, their structure, but imagination fills in the rest. What does the abyss look like to them? Not like our world, surely. Not like our forests or cities or seas. It must be something entirely different. A shifting tapestry of movement and glow, stitched together by eyes evolved to survive without sunlight. This is why the monsters of the abyss often seem uncanny to us. Their eyes are wrong, too large, too green, too forward-facing, too absent. We judge them against our own standards of vision and find them unsettling. But from their perspective, our small eyes, our dependence on constant light, would seem just as bizarre. In the end, sight is relative. To see without light is not failure, but adaptation. It is proof that life can invent new solutions wherever it needs to, no matter how hostile the environment. And so, as we think of eyes in the abyss, we return to the broader question of what it means to be a monster. Perhaps the unsettling gaze of a deep-sea creature is monstrous only to us because it reflects a kind of life we cannot imagine. But to itself, it is perfectly ordinary. Its eyes work, its body survives, its home remains. Darkness has not robbed it of vision. It has reshaped it into something new. And as we drift further into this strange world, we begin to realize that eyes are only the beginning. The abyss holds mouths like traps, bodies like shadows, and ways of hunting that seem unearthly. To understand what monsters still hide there, we must look not only at how they see, but also at how they feed, how they survive, and what forms hunger takes in the dark. When you picture a predator, maybe you imagine a lion's jaws closing around its prey, or a shark's teeth slicing through the water. Those images make sense because they are familiar to us. They fit the rules of the world we know on the surface. But in the abyss, the rules are different. Here food is scarce, and when it appears you cannot afford to let it slip away. That truth has shaped bodies into forms that look to us like nightmares, but to the creatures themselves are simply necessities. Mouths are stretched into impossible proportions, teeth are sharpened into needles, bodies are designed to move slowly and silently, conserving every drop of energy until the moment comes to strike. In the abyss, the monsters wear their hunger on their faces. The most iconic of these predators is the anglerfish, and for good reason. Its body looks almost like an afterthought compared to its mouth. The jaw is wide, the teeth long and curved inward, making escape nearly impossible for anything that wanders too close. But it is the lure that makes it infamous. A glowing rod tipped with bioluminescence dangles in front of its mouth, mimicking the movements of prey. Small creatures drawn to the light in the darkness swim closer, unaware of the trap. Then, in a flash, the jaw snaps shut, and the lure has done its job. To us, the anglerfish looks grotesque, with its distorted face and gaping maw, but in the abyss it is elegance, it is efficiency made flesh. Other fish take the idea even further. The gulper eel, for example, has a jaw that seems almost comical in proportion. Its mouth is larger than its body, capable of scooping up prey like a net. When food is scarce, the ability to swallow something far bigger than yourself is not grotesque. It is survival. Imagine living in a place where meals might come once a month. Would you not take as much as you could whenever the chance appeared? These creatures remind us that design in nature is always tied to need, not beauty. And yet beauty does exist in its own way. Some deep-sea fish carry teeth so fine and transparent they are almost invisible. They form a seamless prison, trapping prey without giving off reflections that might reveal them. Others grow teeth so exaggerated that their own mouths can barely close. The viperfish, for example, carries fangs that curve up past its head when its jaw is shut. To our eyes, it looks monstrous, almost impractical. But when prey drifts near, those teeth guarantee that escape is impossible. In the abyss, every adaptation is an answer to hunger. Not all of these predators rely on speed. In fact, many of them are surprisingly slow. The darkness and scarcity of food make energy conservation essential. Some deep-sea hunters drift motionless for hours, their bodies hardly moving, their mouths open, waiting for something to swim close enough. Silence and stillness are their greatest weapons. We often imagine predators as creatures of motion, but in the abyss, patience is the key to survival. To live here is to know that energy wasted is energy you might never regain. There are also scavengers, animals built not to hunt but to consume what falls. Whale carcasses, for example, become entire ecosystems when they sink to the bottom. Hagfish arrive in writhing masses, slipping into the flesh and devouring it from within, leaving only bone behind. To watch them feed is unsettling, even repulsive, yet they are performing a vital role. They recycle the nutrients of the abyss, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. These mouths, slimy and jawless, are as much part of the nightmare as the sharp-fanged predators, but they are also the reason life continues. Bodies too reflect this world of scarcity and silence. Many deep-sea animals are gelatinous, their forms soft and pliable. Muscle is costly, and in a world where sudden bursts of speed are rare, it is unnecessary. A jelly-like body, fragile to our touch, is perfectly suited to withstanding immense pressure while conserving energy. These bodies drift, hover, float, moving only when they must. To us they look ghostly, incomplete, as if unfinished. But they are finely tuned to their environment. The silence of their movement is not weakness. It is survival strategy. Other bodies are armoured. Crustaceans with shells strong enough to resist pressure. Fish with scales that reflect faint glimmers of light. Worms with tubes that anchor them in place against currents. Each body tells the story of its place in the abyss. Some are built to wait, some to ambush, some to scavenge, some to endure. They are not uniform. They are as varied as the wilderness itself, each a response to a challenge we can barely imagine. And then there are giants. The colossal squid, with tentacles lined with hooks and a beak capable of slicing flesh, is one of the largest predators in the deep. Its body, soft yet massive, moves with surprising grace in the dark. When pieces of these squids wash ashore, people still call them monsters, still imagine them as leviathans rising from the abyss to attack ships. But in truth, they are simply hunters, chasing prey in the silence of the deep. Their size is not menace but adaptation, allowing them to cover distance, to outmatch other predators, to survive in a home where meals are rare. Even among smaller creatures, mouths and bodies take on unsettling forms. Some fish carry hinged jaws that swing open like trapdoors, snapping shut with frightening speed. Others have distensible stomachs, capable of stretching to hold prey many times their own weight. A few carry glowing lures not on rods, but within their mouths themselves, light shining from within the trap. Each of these designs seems nightmarish to us, but they are simply the solutions life has found to a single problem: how to eat in a place where food is almost never guaranteed. What strikes us as monstrous is often just unfamiliar. We live in a world of abundance where food is never more than a store or a field away. Our predators hunt in daylight, their bodies built for speed and strength. In the abyss, life has had to take another path. Mouths are tools, not ornaments. Bodies are shaped by necessity, not aesthetics. Silence is not eerie but essential. These creatures are monsters only in the sense that they remind us how fragile our own rules are. When we see them in photographs or on video, it is easy to shudder. Needle teeth, gaping jaws, bodies like shadows, eyes too large or too absent. But when you look closer, you see the logic. Every grotesque feature is a solution. Every nightmare face is simply life making do with what it has. In that way, the monsters of the abyss are mirrors. They show us what we might look like if we had to live in their world. They reveal the flexibility of life, the endless possibilities of survival. And as strange as they are not alone. For every predator with jaws like a trap, there are prey with defences just as strange. Some glow brightly when bitten, startling predators into letting them go. Others carry spines or produce toxins, or simply drift too invisibly to notice. The balance of hunter and hunted plays out in silence, in darkness, with mouths and bodies shaped by endless trial and error. Each encounter, each adaptation, is part of the story of the abyss. So when we ask what monsters still hide there, mouths and bodies are only part of the answer. Yes, there are jaws that look like nightmares. Yes, there are bodies built like ghosts. But behind those shapes lies a simple truth. They are survivors in a world that does not forgive mistakes. And the more we look, the more we realise that the nightmare is only in our imagination. To them, it is home. The silence of the abyss is deceptive. It is not emptiness, but patience. Creatures wait, still and hidden, conserving energy, until the moment arrives. Then, suddenly the silence breaks. Jaws snap shut, stomachs expand, and the body, so still a moment before, comes alive. Then, as quickly as it began, the silence returns. It is a rhythm as old as the abyss itself, a rhythm we are only beginning to understand. And from that silence, another kind of wonder emerges. Because if mouths and bodies can be shaped in ways that seem impossible, what about light? What about the creatures that do not wait silently but instead create their own glow? In the abyss, not all monsters are built for shadows. Some are built for brilliance, carrying lanterns in their bodies, turning darkness into a theatre of sparks. When you think of darkness, it often feels absolute, as if nothing can break it except an outside force. In a windowless room, the light switch is the only way to see. But the abyss teaches us that darkness is never complete. It is filled with sparks, glows, pulses, and flashes that come not from the sun or the stars, but from the creatures themselves. In the deep sea, light is a resource as precious as food or oxygen, and countless species have evolved the ability to create it. The result is a world where lanterns drift, where hunters carry headlights on their heads, where prey release glowing smoke to confuse their pursuers. It is a theatre of living light, dazzling in its variety, unsettling in its strangeness, and beautiful in its inevitability. This light, called bioluminescence, is one of the most widespread traits in the deep ocean. It is not magic, though it might look like it. It is chemistry. Inside the cells of these creatures, special molecules react with oxygen, producing photons. The glow can be steady or flashing, faint or bright, blue, green, or occasionally red. And unlike fire, it does not produce heat, which is essential in an environment where conserving energy is everything. To us, it feels miraculous that life can make light out of nothing. To the creatures of the abyss, it is simply another tool. The uses of bioluminescence are as diverse as the animals that carry it. For some, it is a lure. The anglerfish is the classic example, dangling its glowing rod in front of its mouth like a fisherman's line. Smaller fish, curious or fooled, approach, and in a flash the jaws close. The light is a trick, a trap disguised as opportunity. Other predators use similar tactics, carrying glowing patches on their bodies to mimic the faint glimmers of plankton, attracting prey close enough to strike. To live in the abyss is to know that light can be both a promise and a lie. But light is not only for hunting. For many animals, it is defense. Some fish and squid release glowing clouds into the water when attacked, the way an octopus releases ink. The sudden flash startles the predator, giving the prey time to escape. Others use light to confuse, pulsing or flickering in patterns that overwhelm the senses of their pursuers. A few species go further, glowing brightly when bitten, as if to announce, "I am not worth the trouble, everyone can see you now." In a world of darkness, to shine is to expose, and sometimes exposure is the best protection. Communication is another role. Certain fish flash in rhythms unique to their species, signals that say, "I am here," or "I am ready to mate." Shrimp send out pulses of light that look like coded messages. Even some jellyfish appear to use light displays as a warning, broadcasting their presence with glowing ripples. To us, these flashes are mysterious, often impossible to decode, but to the creatures themselves they may be as clear as language. The abyss, silent and dark, becomes filled with conversations written in light. One of the most fascinating uses of bioluminescence is camouflage. It seems counterintuitive. Why would glowing help you hide? But in the deep sea, where faint traces of light from above can still be detected, glowing from below can erase your shadow. Many fish and squid have light organs on their bellies, producing just enough glow to match the dim light filtering down. Seen from beneath, they disappear, blending perfectly into the faint brightness of the water above. This trick, called counter-illumination, is one of the most elegant solutions evolution has devised. To predators below, the fish is invisible, erased by its own light. The forms of bioluminescence are as varied as the creatures that wield it. Some glows are constant, like the soft lantern of the anglerfish. Others are sudden, like the strobe-like pulses of deep-sea shrimp. Certain jellyfish carry lights that ripple along their bodies, waves of colour rolling across their gelatinous forms. Some squid fire off bursts like underwater fireworks, a rapid display of panic and defiance. There are even fish with headlights, paired beams of light beneath their eyes, sweeping through the dark like the lamps of a car on a nighttime road. Each form of light serves a purpose, each shaped by survival in the abyss. The beauty of these lights cannot be overstated. When submersibles descend into the darkness, one of the first things observers notice is the constant flicker of bioluminescence. Every movement of the vessel stirs tiny organisms that glow in response, creating a trail of sparks like a comet tail in the water. To drift through this world is to feel as if you are moving among stars, a galaxy turned inside out, with the lights of life scattered all around. It is a reminder that even in the most inhospitable places, beauty thrives, and yet the beauty hides danger. Light attracts as much as it warns. Many predators key in on bioluminescence, watching for the faintest flash, knowing it means food is near. Some even exploit it directly. Cookie-cutter sharks, small but fierce, use their glowing undersides to blend in with the faint light from above, leaving only a dark patch near their throats. Other fish mistake this patch for small prey, strike at it, and in the instant of confusion the shark bites them instead, carving out a circular wound with its sharp teeth. Here, light is not just a tool but a weapon, sharpened into deception. Bioluminescence also raises questions about life itself. On land, very few animals glow: the firefly, a handful of fungi, some rare insects. In the ocean, glowing is everywhere. Why? One answer is that the ocean provides the perfect conditions for light to matter. In the abyss, darkness is constant, so even the faintest glow makes a difference. Water transmits blue and green light efficiently, so those colours carry far. And predators, prey, and mates are constantly searching for signals. In that environment, light becomes as fundamental as sight or sound on land. It is not rare, but routine. Even so, there are mysteries. Some glowing patterns seem too elaborate for simple survival. Certain jellyfish ripple in dazzling displays that look more like art than defense. Some fish flash in rapid codes that scientists still cannot interpret. Are these signals we do not yet understand? Are they remnants of ancient behaviours, once vital but now vestigial? Or do they serve purposes we cannot yet guess at? The abyss is filled with these unanswered questions, and every glowing lantern is both explanation and mystery. What does it mean to live in a world lit by living lanterns? For the animals, it means survival shaped by light they create themselves. For us, it means awe. We call them monsters because their forms unsettle us, but their lights remind us that life is never only brutal. It can also be luminous, inventive, astonishingly beautiful. To see a fish dangle its glowing lure, or a jellyfish ripple with light, is to glimpse not horror but wonder. These creatures, so far removed from our world, show us that even in darkness life finds a way to shine. And still, the question lingers. If so many creatures glow, what have we not yet seen? What displays might exist deeper than our submersibles have gone? What patterns of light, what hidden conversations, what strange and brilliant forms still drift beyond our reach? The abyss holds lanterns we have glimpsed, but surely many remain unseen. Until we go further, the darkness will keep its secrets. The glow of living lanterns is not the end of the story. It is only one part of the vast puzzle of survival in the abyss. For where there is light, there are giants drawn to it, shadows moving silently in the black, bodies larger than anything we expect. And as we continue deeper, the question shifts again. Beyond the glowing sparks, what giants still drift below, unseen and waiting? In the abyss, size works differently than it does in the world we know on land. Up here, giants are rare. On land, the largest animals live mostly in our imaginations, because the cost of growing that big is often too high. But in the deep sea, where the pressure is immense, where food is scarce, and where energy must be carefully conserved, gigantism becomes a strategy. It is a strange twist of life. In the most extreme environment, bodies sometimes grow to astonishing proportions. Some drift so quietly that you might miss their scale entirely, if not for the rare glimpses we've caught on camera. They are the giants that drift below, reminders that the ocean holds forms of life still capable of surprising us with their magnitude. The most famous of these, of course, is the giant squid. For centuries it was a creature of myth. Sailors told stories of tentacles rising from the waves, wrapping around ships, dragging men to their deaths. The kraken, as it came to be called, haunted maps and imaginations alike. For a long time, science dismissed these tales as exaggerations or fabrications, but then pieces of giant squids began to wash ashore. Beaks the size of fists, tentacles lined with suction cups armed with hooks, and eventually entire bodies were recovered, confirming what had once been myth. The giant squid was real, and not only real but massive, stretching more than 10 meters long. Even larger is the colossal squid, a cousin of the giant discovered more recently and less frequently. It is bulkier, heavier, with shorter arms but even larger eyes, some of the biggest in the animal kingdom. Those eyes, nearly the size of a soccer ball, are designed to detect the faintest movement in the abyss. Its hooks, curved and sharp, line its tentacles. Unlike its cousin, which is long and slender, the colossal squid is stout and powerful, a predator built to grapple with prey in the dark. Very few have been seen alive. Most of what we know comes from carcasses caught accidentally by fishing nets in the Southern Ocean. Yet even these rare encounters remind us that the abyss still holds titans we barely understand. But squids are not the only giants in the deep. Deep-sea isopods, distant relatives of the pill bugs you might find in your garden, grow to the size of dinner plates, their armoured bodies crawling slowly along the seafloor. In their strange, oversized forms, we see a phenomenon scientists call deep-sea gigantism. For reasons still debated, some creatures grow far larger in the abyss than their shallow water relatives. Cold temperatures may slow metabolism, allowing growth over longer lifespans. High pressure may favour larger body sizes. Scarcity of predators may allow size to increase unchecked. Whatever the reason, the result is startling. Creatures that are small and harmless in shallow water become large and unsettling in the depths. Consider the oarfish, another giant of the abyss. Long, ribbon-like, with a body that can stretch more than 8 meters, it drifts vertically in the water column, its silver form glimmering faintly. Rarely seen, it is believed to be the source of many sea serpent legends. When it washes ashore, its strange, elongated body looks almost unreal, more like a mythical dragon than a fish. Yet it is real, living its life quietly in the deep, unseen by most of us. To imagine it drifting through the dark, its fins rippling as it hovers upright, is to glimpse a living piece of the legends that have haunted sailors for centuries. There are also sharks that embody this abyssal gigantism. The Greenland shark, for instance, is not the largest by length, but is among the most extraordinary. Living in cold, deep waters, it grows slowly but steadily, eventually reaching lengths of 5 or 6 meters. Even more astonishing is its lifespan. Some individuals are believed to be over 400 years old, making them the longest-lived vertebrates known. Imagine a shark swimming in silence through the dark that was born before your country even existed. These are not just giants in size, but in time, stretching across centuries as they drift through the abyss. Even whales, though not permanent residents of the abyss, become part of its story. When they die and their bodies sink, they become whale falls, massive sources of food for the creatures below. Entire communities gather on their remains, feeding for decades. In this way, giants of the surface feed the giants of the deep, connecting two worlds through death. The abyss does not waste. Every giant, whether squid or whale, becomes part of the cycle. But what makes these giants so compelling is not just their size, but the way they drift. In the abyss, movement is often slow, deliberate. Energy cannot be wasted. The colossal squid hovers before striking, conserving power until the last moment. The oarfish ripples its fins gently, almost lazily, to hold its place. The Greenland shark moves so slowly it might seem motionless, drifting with the currents as if time itself does not matter. Giants in the abyss are not always hunters in constant pursuit. They are patient, silent, conserving energy, waiting for the right opportunity. And because they are so rarely seen, they carry an aura of mystery that fuels our imagination. The giant squid was once a legend because no one had a proof. Even today, with video evidence, it feels unreal, as if it belongs more to mythology than to science. The colossal squid remains largely unseen, its bulk hinted at only by the fragments we have recovered. The oarfish, when it washes ashore, is so strange that people still mistake it for a sea serpent. In each case, the giant is more than an animal. It is a story, a bridge between myth and reality. This is part of what makes the abyss the last wilderness. Its giants remind us that even now, in an age where satellites map the globe and cameras circle the planet from orbit, there are still creatures that evade us. They live their lives beyond our reach, hidden not by distance, but by depth. They do not need to hide, yet the ocean keeps them from us. And so we imagine them as monsters, because we cannot help but fill the gaps in our knowledge with fear and awe. The truth, though, is simpler. These giants are not villains. They do not rise to attack ships or drag sailors into the depths. They hunt, they feed, they drift. Their bodies are shaped by the same rules as every other creature: survival, adaptation, persistence. They seem monstrous only because we expect the deep to mirror our own world, and when it does not, we recoil. But when you look past the fear, you see resilience, you see patience, you see life finding its place in the most unlikely of environments, and still, the mystery lingers. If the giants we know are already so strange, what else drifts beyond our reach? What forms of gigantism have evolved in trenches we have never explored? Could there be squids larger than any we have found, sharks older than any we have dated, fish longer than our longest submersibles? The abyss is vast enough to hold secrets of any size, and until we explore it fully, the question remains open. The giants that drift below are reminders that life takes many forms, some familiar, some extraordinary. They show us that monsters can be real, but not in the way we once feared. They are not threats, but wonders. They are proof that our world is not fully known, that there are still stories waiting in the dark. And as we move forward, we find that size is only one way the abyss unsettles us. For among the giants drift hunters that take a different approach, not with massive bodies, but with transparency itself, disappearing into the water, hiding in plain sight. In the abyss, where every adaptation is shaped by darkness and scarcity, invisibility becomes one of the most powerful strategies. If you cannot outswim predators, and you cannot outfight them, perhaps you can simply disappear. Some creatures of the deep take this to extraordinary levels, evolving bodies so translucent that they seem like ghosts drifting in the water. Their muscles, their skin, even their bones in some cases are see-through, leaving only faint outlines, glowing organs, or eyes suspended in the dark. These hunters with transparent skins are among the strangest beings in the ocean, because they challenge our very idea of what an animal should look like. They are not armoured, not brightly coloured, not solid. They are shadows made flesh, designed to hide in plain sight. Transparency works because the abyss is not empty. Even in the dark, many animals can detect faint glimmers of light, especially bioluminescence. Shadows betray bodies. If you block the faint light filtering from above, you reveal yourself to predators lurking below. But if your body is clear, the light passes through you. You vanish into the water around you. That vanishing act is one of the most effective defences in the deep sea, and so it appears again and again in different creatures. One of the most remarkable examples is the glass squid. Its body is almost entirely transparent, with only its digestive gland and eyes visible. When it drifts, it looks like little more than a faint outline, a whisper of a creature suspended in the water. Yet it is a capable predator, using its tentacles to snatch smaller animals while remaining nearly invisible to anything larger. Its transparency is not perfect, but in the faint glows of the abyss, it is enough to confuse attackers. To us it looks eerie, like a living ghost. To its prey, it looks like nothing at all, until it is too late. The barrel-leaf fish is another strange inhabitant. Its head is a clear dome, and inside this transparent shield its tubular eyes rotate upward, scanning for silhouettes against the faint light above. When first described, it seemed like something invented, too strange to be real. A fish with a glass forehead, eyes glowing green, organs visible through its skull. Yet it exists, drifting quietly in the deep, using its strange anatomy to hunt jellyfish and small creatures caught in their tentacles. Its transparency protects its delicate eyes and allows it to track prey without revealing itself. Shrimp, too, often rely on transparency. Some deep-sea species are almost entirely invisible except for their glowing organs, faint pinpricks of light that betray them. Others carry translucent shells that make them nearly undetectable in the water column. These shrimp are not large, not threatening on their own, but as part of the ecosystem they embody the strategy of vanishing as survival. To predators, they are faint outlines that slip away into the dark. To prey, they are sudden bursts of motion from nowhere. Transparency serves both sides of the hunt. And then there are creatures that take transparency to extremes. Certain comb jellies, for instance, are almost completely invisible until they move. When they do, light refracts along the rows of tiny cilia on their bodies, creating shimmering rainbows. To human eyes, they look magical, like floating prisms in the water. But the shimmer is only a byproduct. Their true adaptation is their near invisibility, which keeps them hidden until they are disturbed. Their transparency makes them hunters, drifting unnoticed, capturing plankton and small prey with sticky tentacles. They do not need speed or teeth or lures. They need only patience and the ability to go unseen. Transparency comes with trade-offs, of course. Without pigment, these creatures are fragile, easily damaged by light or sudden change in pressure. Their invisibility is perfect only in their natural environment. Bring them to the surface, and their ghostly bodies collapse, their delicate tissues unable to withstand the change. This fragility is part of why we know so little about them. Many vanish not only into the water, but also in our attempts to study them. Their bodies simply cannot survive outside the abyss. But this fragility should not be mistaken for weakness. In their world, transparency is strength. It allows them to live without armor, to hunt without speed, to avoid predators without needing to fight. It is a strategy perfectly matched to the abyss. Where other animals grow massive jaws or bioluminescent traps, these creatures choose invisibility, and in the darkness, invisibility is often the best weapon of all. There is also something unsettling about seeing them. When cameras capture footage of glass squid or transparent fish, it can be difficult to tell where the body ends and the water begins. Sometimes you see only the eyes, two glowing orbs suspended in blackness, attached to nothing visible. Other times you catch a glimpse of organs, faintly pulsing inside a body you can barely see. It feels unnatural, as if something has been erased. But that is only our perspective. To them, it is as natural as our skin is to us. Transparency also reveals how different survival can look. On land, animals often use camouflage, stripes, spots, colours that blend into grass or bark. In the abyss, where there is no background to blend into, transparency becomes the ultimate camouflage. It is not about matching your environment, but about becoming it. To disappear completely is the surest way to remain safe. And so, again and again, creatures of the deep evolve bodies that are less body than outline, less flesh than suggestion. Hunters with transparent skins remind us that monsters are not always large or armed with teeth. Sometimes they are nearly invisible, drifting quietly, striking only when the moment is right. Their strangeness lies not in their violence, but in their absence. We expect bodies to be solid, to have shape and weight. These creatures defy that expectation, living lives in which their very invisibility is their greatest power. And as strange as they are only one part of the abyssal story. For while some creatures vanish into the water, others embrace the opposite. Some grow into odd, elaborate forms, tiny but bizarre, built for survival in ways that seem almost playful. If transparency is one answer to the abyss, then eccentricity is another. And as we continue downward, we begin to meet the odd, the tiny, the almost impossible beings that populate the deep. When people imagine the monsters of the abyss, their minds usually leap to the giants. Squids the size of buses, sharks that live for centuries, serpentine fish mistaken for dragons. But if you linger in the darkness long enough, you realise the most unsettling creatures are not always the largest. Some of the most extraordinary beings in the deep are small, fragile, even delicate, but so strange in form or behaviour that they defy easy explanation. They are the odd, the tiny, the almost impossible, living proofs that life in the abyss follows rules very different from the ones we're used to. To start, think of the sea cucumber. On the surface, its relatives look unremarkable, simple animals crawling slowly across reefs or sandy bottoms. But in the abyss, sea cucumbers transform. Some grow transparent, their insides visible through gelatinous skin. Others inflate balloon-like bodies that drift above the seafloor, using small tentacles to catch falling marine snow. Their shapes range from sausage-like to alien, some with wings, some with tails, some with frills that look almost decorative. These are not giants or predators, but scavengers, thriving in ways that seem comical to us but are perfectly suited to the deep. Then there are the worms. In the abyss, worms are everywhere, and their diversity is staggering. Some are tiny and thread-like, sifting particles from the mud. Others are flamboyant, with plumes that wave like feathers, feeding on chemicals from hydrothermal vents. One of the most famous is the Pompeii worm, living in waters near vents so hot they would kill most other creatures instantly. Covered in bacteria that insulate its body, it thrives in a place that seems impossible. To see a worm waving its feathery appendages in a boiling current at the bottom of the ocean is to realise how flexible life truly is. Even stranger are the creatures that live in symbiosis with the chemicals of the earth itself. Tube worms, towering over 2 meters tall, anchor themselves around vent chimneys. They have no mouths, no stomachs, no way to feed in the usual sense. Instead, they rely on bacteria inside their bodies to convert vent chemicals into energy. They're animals that survive by farming microbes within their own tissues. To us, this seems almost impossible. How can an animal live without eating? Yet in the abyss, it is a successful strategy, one that supports entire communities. There are also tiny crustaceans, often overlooked, but remarkable in their resilience. Amphipods, for example, have been found in the deepest trenches, scurrying across the seafloor more than 10 kilometers down. They are small, often just a few centimeters long, but their presence proves that life can endure even under pressures that would crush steel. Some amphipods feed on scraps of organic material, others scavenge from carcasses, still others nibble at microbial mats. They are not terrifying, not dramatic, but they are essential, forming the base of food webs in places we once thought lifeless. And then there are creatures that seem almost like accidents of design. The Dumbo octopus, for instance, is small, often less than half a metre, with fins that resemble ears. It flaps them gently as it drifts through the water, looking almost cartoonish. Yet its delicate form is perfectly adapted to the deep, where slow, energy-efficient movement is vital. To us it looks odd, even whimsical, but it survives where few others can. The abyss is full of such animals, strange not because they are monstrous, but because they remind us of how playful evolution can sometimes seem. Some of the tiniest creatures are also the most vital. Microbes living in sediments at the bottom of the ocean play roles we are only beginning to understand. They recycle nutrients, break down organic matter, and even process metals. Some live so deep in the crust of the earth beneath the seafloor that they exist entirely without sunlight or surface input. These microbes are among the most extreme life forms on the planet, proving that life does not require our familiar comforts. They are invisible to the naked eye, yet without them, the abyss would not function. The oddities extend to behaviours as well as bodies. Some fish, too small to intimidate predators, glow brightly to attract larger ones, sacrificing themselves in the process but ensuring their species survives by feeding others. Certain jellies invert their bodies when disturbed, turning inside out to confuse attackers. Others use long trailing tentacles that stretch for dozens of meters, almost invisible, creating traps in the dark. These tentacles, so fine they cannot be seen by prey, deliver stings that paralyze instantly. The body may be small, but the reach is enormous. Perhaps the most haunting of the small creatures are those that mimic the environment itself. Some carry tiny bioluminescent patches arranged like the falling snow of the abyss, blending perfectly into the background of drifting particles. Others curl into shapes that resemble debris, tricking predators into passing them by. Camouflage in the abyss is not about blending into colours or textures, as on land, but about blending into the very concept of nothingness. To disappear in the dark requires subtlety, and these creatures achieve it with astonishing precision. What makes these odd and tiny beings so important is that they remind us the abyss is not only a home for monsters of scale, it is also a place where smallness, fragility, and eccentricity can thrive. They may not appear in legends of sea serpents or krakens, but they are no less extraordinary. Their existence expands our idea of what life can be. They prove that survival is not only about power or size, but about adaptability, creativity, and sometimes sheer weirdness. To see them on film is often disorienting. Transparent bodies pulsing faintly, worms waving plumes like banners, octopuses flapping ear-like fins. They look less like animals than like inventions, as if someone imagined them for a story rather than found them in reality. But they are real, and they are everywhere, drifting silently in the abyss. The odd, the tiny, the almost impossible make up much of the biomass of the deep. They are not exceptions, they are the rule. And when you realise this, the abyss changes in your mind. It stops being only a place of horror and begins to feel like a place of endless invention. Monsters are not always terrifying. Sometimes they are whimsical, absurd, even endearing. Yet they are monsters still, if only because they defy our expectations, showing us forms of life we never would have guessed. The giants of the abyss draw our imagination, but it is the tiny and the strange that fill its world. Without them, the giants could not survive. Without microbes, without amphipods, without drifting worms and cucumbers, the abyss would collapse. These small beings, so easily overlooked, are the foundation of the ecosystem. They may look odd, even impossible, but they are essential. And in their oddity, they remind us that the abyss is a place of extremes, where every possible solution to survival is tested. Some grow enormous, some turn invisible, some glow. Some abandon feeding altogether and rely on microbes within their bodies. Each one is strange to us, but each one is logical in its own way. The abyss is a laboratory of life, running experiments for millions of years, producing forms we find monstrous or absurd, but which are simply answers to the question, how can you live here? The answer, it turns out, is in countless ways, some gigantic, some transparent, some glowing, some so tiny they go unnoticed. All of them odd, many of them seemingly impossible. Together they make the abyss a place that will never be ordinary, never predictable. And as we continue deeper, we see that oddity does not end with appearance. It extends to the environment itself. Because beyond the tiny creatures lies a realm where pressure alone is enough to crush steel, yet life still persists. When you stand at sea level, you don't usually think about the weight of the water pressing down around you. The ocean feels open, fluid, light enough to swim in. But the deeper you go, the heavier it becomes, each metre adding another layer of weight. At 100 metres, you already feel pressure strong enough to squeeze air from your body if you tried to descend without equipment. At 1,000 metres, the pressure is 100 times greater than the atmosphere at the surface. By the time you reach the deepest trenches, The pressure is so immense it could crush steel, collapsing submarines and machinery that are not built precisely to endure it. These gulfs of crushing force are some of the harshest environments on Earth, and yet somehow life still finds a way there. To understand this pressure, imagine stacking cars on top of yourself. At the surface, the air around you exerts pressure equivalent to the weight of a small car on every square inch of your skin, but you don't notice because your body's built to balance it. Add water on top of that though, and the numbers become overwhelming. At 1,000 meters, it's like having 50 cars pressing down on every square inch. At 10,000 meters in places like the Mariana Trench, the weight is like a mountain sitting on your body. Any air-filled space would collapse instantly. For humans, it is unimaginable. For most machines, it is unmanageable. But for the creatures of the abyss, it is home. How do they survive? The answer lies in bodies built differently. Many deep-sea animals have no air spaces in their bodies. No lungs, no gas-filled swim bladders, nothing that can be crushed. Instead, they are made of soft tissue, pliable enough to withstand the pressure. Gelatinous bodies that would collapse into formless lumps at the surface are perfectly suited for the abyss. The very fragility that makes them impossible to study outside their environment is what allows them to thrive where pressure would otherwise destroy. Their bones are reduced, their muscles thin, their forms adapted not to resist pressure, but to yield to it. Even so, life faces challenges beyond just structure. Pressure affects chemistry itself. Proteins can unfold, enzymes can stop working, membranes can become too rigid to function. To counter this, many deep-sea organisms rely on special molecules called piezolites, which stabilize their proteins under pressure. Trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, is one of the most important of these, helping cells function despite the crushing weight. Interestingly, TMAO is the same compound that gives fish their distinctive smell. Deep-sea fish, needing more TMAO to survive, accumulate higher levels of it, making their flesh smell and taste stronger than shallow water species. What we notice as odour is, for them, the secret to living where pressure never relents. Machines, by contrast, struggle immensely in these gulfs. Early attempts to explore the deep often ended in failure, with metal hulls buckling, glass windows imploding, and cables snapping under strain. Even today, engineering vehicles capable of reaching the deepest trenches requires extraordinary precision. Spheres of titanium or special alloys are used to house instruments or humans, because only a sphere distributes the crushing force evenly. Submersibles like the Trieste, which reached the Mariana Trench in 1960, relied on thick walls and careful design to resist collapse. More recently, robotic landers and remotely operated vehicles have gone even deeper, but each journey reminds us of how unforgiving the environment is. One mistake in design, one flaw in material, and the abyss will crush the machine like a toy. And yet, the organisms there go about their lives as if nothing is unusual. Amphipods scuttle across the trench floor. Sea cucumbers drift lazily, feeding on marine snow. Fish with soft, gelatinous bodies swim slowly in the blackness. They do not resist the pressure, they exist within it, adapted so completely that they no longer notice it. What would kill us instantly is, to them, simply normal. That contrast is what makes the abyss so extraordinary. It reminds us that harshness is relative. Our nightmare of crushing force is their everyday home. These gulfs also remind us of scale. The trenches of the ocean are deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Imagine inverting the world's tallest mountain, burying it beneath the sea, and still having kilometers of water above its summit. These are not small cracks in the seafloor, but vast valleys, immense gulfs stretching thousands of kilometers. The Mariana Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench, each one is a scar in the Earth's crust, plunging deeper than any canyon on land. Exploring them is like visiting another planet, and in a way they are alien worlds, shaped by forces we rarely encounter elsewhere. Volcanoes and earthquakes are born in these depths. The trenches mark the places where tectonic plates collide, one slipping beneath another into the mantle. Here, the earth is remade, mountains and islands formed from the grinding of stone kilometres below. Life in these gulfs is not only contending with pressure, but with geology in motion. Earthquakes can shake entire regions, tsunamis can rise from their shifts, and hydrothermal vents can spew chemicals that fuel unexpected ecosystems. To live here is not just to endure pressure, but to endure constant change. It is tempting to think of these gulfs as lifeless, too extreme for anything to survive. For a long time, scientists believed that nothing could live below 6,000 or 7,000 meters. The pressure seemed too great, the environment too unforgiving. But exploration proved otherwise. Amphipods were found at 11,000 meters. Fish were captured at depths once thought impossible. Microbes thrive in the sediments of the trench floors, processing organic matter and supporting entire food webs. Again and again, life proved more resilient than we imagined. Still, life here is limited. The fish found at the deepest depths are not large predators, but small, fragile species, their bodies soft and flabby, their movements slow. There is a limit to what even evolution can achieve under such conditions. Giants like squid and sharks do not descend into the very deepest trenches. Instead, these gulfs are populated mostly by smaller, more delicate creatures, adapted to the maximum pressures of Earth. They may not be monsters in size, but they are monsters in persistence, thriving where nothing else should. For us, the gulfs where pressure crushes steel are reminders of our limits. We can fly to space, we can walk on the moon, but the deepest parts of our own planet remain mostly out of reach. Each descent requires extraordinary engineering, and even then, we see only brief glimpses. The trenches are too vast, too remote, too unforgiving for constant exploration. They remain wilderness not because we have ignored them, but because they resist us. They crush our machines, they humble our designs, they remind us that nature still holds places we cannot easily conquer, and yet they call to us. The idea that there are valleys deeper than mountains are tall, hidden beneath the waves, filled with life we barely understand, is irresistible. We know that every expedition will reveal something new, something strange, something that defies our expectations. Perhaps a new species of fish, perhaps a new kind of microbe, perhaps even entire ecosystems built on rules we have not yet imagined. The gulfs are not empty. They are full of possibility. It is this possibility that feeds the myths of monsters. If life can exist where pressure crushes steel, what forms might it take? Could there be creatures so large and strange that we have never glimpsed them? Could the stories of ancient sailors have some basis in truth, born from shadows rising out of gulfs we still cannot fully explore? The abyss invites these questions, not because we lack imagination, but because reality itself keeps outpacing our guesses. Every time we think we know the limits of life, the abyss proves us wrong. The gulfs are the harshest places on Earth, but they are not barren. They are populated by survivors, by creatures that embody the resilience of life. Their very existence is a kind of defiance, proof that the world is larger and stranger than we assume. They are not monsters in the sense of terror, but in the sense of wonder, beings that should not exist by our rules yet do by theirs. And as we move past these crushing depths, we begin to understand why myths of the sea have always loomed so large in human culture. When faced with a world we cannot see, cannot explore, cannot endure, we invent stories to fill the dark, and so the abyss has always been home not only to real creatures, but to imagined ones, monsters of our own making, born from the gulfs where light never shines. For as long as humans have looked to the sea, we've filled it with stories. The ocean is vast, and for most of history it was unknowable, a horizon of mystery stretching farther than the eye could see. Ships sailed into its darkness and sometimes never returned. Shadows moved beneath the waves, unfamiliar shapes washed ashore. voices carried on the wind from nowhere. From these glimpses, from fear, from awe, we built myths, and the abyss, hidden beneath the surface, gave those myths their foundation. When we ask what monsters still hide in the abyss, we are also asking what monsters we have always imagined there, born not from biology alone, but from human imagination. The earliest myths came from cultures whose lives were tied most closely to the sea. To the ancient Greeks, the ocean was the domain of Poseidon, god of storms and earthquakes, his wrath reflected in waves that could swallow ships. They told of Scylla and Charybdis, two monsters lurking at opposite sides of a narrow strait, one a many-headed beast that snatched sailors from their decks, the other a whirlpool that dragged entire vessels into its throat. These tales reflected real dangers, reefs, currents, storms, but they clothed them in monstrous forms, making the unknown a little more comprehensible. Norse sailors spoke of Jörmungandr, the world serpent, so vast it encircled the earth itself. Coiled beneath the ocean, it was said to rise only at the end of days, when its thrashing would flood the land. Here again, the sea became the home of something beyond measure, something that dwarfed human scale. A serpent stretching across the ocean may not exist in truth, but giant eels, oarfish and squids could easily have fed the image. The abyss provided shadows, and myth supplied the rest. Polynesian cultures told of Taniwha, beings that lived in deep pools, rivers and seas. Some were guardians, others were dangers, capable of overturning canoes or swallowing swimmers whole. In these stories, the ocean was never empty. It was always inhabited by something watching from below. This sense of presence, of unseen beings dwelling beneath, is a constant across cultures. The abyss, invisible and unknowable, was too vast to be left blank in the human imagination. It demanded to be filled. As sailors ventured farther, their myths grew with them. Medieval maps famously decorated unknown waters with images of sea serpents, dragons and krakens. The kraken in particular became one of the most enduring figures, a creature said to rise from the deep and drag ships beneath the waves with its massive tentacles. Fishermen off the coasts of Norway and Greenland told stories of whirlpools left in its wake, of monstrous arms wrapping around entire vessels. For centuries, scholars debated whether such a beast could exist. Today, we know the kraken was rooted in reality, inspired by sightings of giant squid. But the myth had its own power, shaping how generations thought about the sea long before the truth was known. Even in modern times, myths persist. Sailors in the 19th century reported sea serpents off the coast of New England, long snake-like creatures rising from the waves. Others told of mermaids, sometimes beautiful, sometimes monstrous, glimpsed at a distance and vanishing before they could be approached. Many of these sightings were likely misinterpretations, seals mistaken for women, oarfish mistaken for serpents. But the fact that the stories endured shows how deeply we needed to populate the abyss with figures, how unwilling we were to accept emptiness. What makes these myths powerful is not their accuracy, but their symbolism. The abyss represents the unknown, and in every culture, the unknown is where monsters live. Darkness on land gave us spirits and demons. Darkness at sea gave us leviathans and serpents. The abyss is both real and metaphorical, a place of fear and fascination, of death and discovery. By imagining monsters there, we gave shape to our own uncertainties. It is also striking how often the myths align with reality, at least in part. The kraken echoes the giant squid. Sea serpents mirror the bodies of oarfish and whales seen in unfamiliar angles. Mermaids may have been inspired by manatees, glimpsed in poor light after long weeks at sea. The whirlpool Charybdis reflects the very real danger of tidal currents. Myths did not spring from nothing. They were rooted in observations distorted by distance, fear and imagination, but always connected to something real. And in some ways, the truth is stranger than the myths. The anglerfish, with its glowing lure and gaping jaw, looks more terrifying than many imagined sea monsters. The viperfish, with its fangs protruding from its mouth, is a nightmare made real. The colossal squid, with eyes the size of shields, is more impressive than the kraken. What the abyss actually holds often exceeds the myths we created to explain it. Reality does not need exaggeration. It is monstrous enough on its own. Still, the myths matter. They tell us about ourselves as much as they tell us about the sea. They reveal how humans have always struggled with the unknown, how we have always filled gaps in knowledge with stories. They show how the abyss has shaped our imagination, how it has given us not only creatures but metaphors. The ocean became the symbol of chaos, of danger, of the unconscious mind itself. Its monsters were never just physical. They were psychological, reflecting our fears of drowning, of getting lost, of what might happen when we sail too far from shore. Even today, when we have cameras that can reach the deep, the myths linger. We still tell stories of giant creatures yet unseen, of shadows in the trenches, of beings too large or too strange to have escaped notice. Every unexplored trench leaves room for imagination. Every blurred video clip sparks rumours of sea serpents. The abyss still invites myths, because it is still unknown. Technology has advanced, but mystery remains, and mystery is the soil in which myths grow. When we think of what monsters might still hide in the abyss, we are not only asking about biology, we are asking about imagination. Which stories still live in the dark? Which fears still rise when we look out over the waves at night? The abyss is not empty of meaning. It is filled with centuries of human thought, with creatures real and imagined, with myths that refuse to die. And in that sense, the myths themselves are part of the wilderness. They are cultural echoes of the deep, born from our encounters with the unknown. Just as bioluminescent creatures light their bodies in the dark, myths light our minds in the face of uncertainty. They may not be true in the literal sense, but they are true in another way. They capture our relationship with the abyss, our awe, our fear, our inability to leave it blank. As we continue our descent, we find that the myths and the reality often intertwine. For every kraken, there is a squid. For every serpent, there is an oarfish. For every monster of imagination, there is a creature stranger still in the depths. The line between myth and truth blurs, and in that blur lies the enduring power of the abyss. Among all the myths that rose from the sea, a few stand taller than the rest, lodged deep in our collective memory. The kraken, the leviathan, and the endless parade of sea serpents that haunted the edges of maps have outlasted countless other legends. They endure because they spoke to something universal, the feeling that the abyss, unseen and unknowable, must hold monsters of unimaginable scale. For centuries these creatures were symbols of fear and power, invoked in sermons, written in sagas, whispered in taverns, drawn onto charts where the known world ended. And though we now have science to guide us, these names still cling to the ocean's shadows. To speak of the abyss is, in a way, to speak of them. Take the kraken, perhaps the most famous of all. In Scandinavian folklore, the kraken was not just a creature, it was a force of nature. Said to dwell off the coasts of Norway and Greenland, it was described as a beast so large it could be mistaken for an island, its body hidden beneath the waves, its arms stretching out to ensnare ships. When it rose, the sea boiled. When it sank, it created whirlpools capable of swallowing entire vessels. Fishermen told of tentacles coiling around masts, of shadows moving beneath their boats, of waters suddenly disturbed for no reason. To encounter the kraken was not simply to face an animal, it was to face the ocean itself in its most dangerous form. For a long time, scholars debated whether such a creature could exist. Some dismissed it as pure invention, while others speculated it might be a giant species of squid or octopus. Today, we know that giant squid are real, and their size and tentacles match much of the kraken legend. Imagine a fisherman in a small wooden boat, seeing a squid's arms breaking the surface, its enormous body rising unexpectedly from the dark. Without context, Without understanding, the mind leaps to monsters. The Kraken was myth, yes, but it was myth built on glimpses of reality. The abyss provided the body, and human imagination gave it monstrous scale. Then there is the Leviathan, a name that carries weight far beyond folklore. In the Hebrew Bible, the Leviathan is described as a massive sea creature, a symbol of chaos and power. In some passages, it is a serpent coiled in the sea, in others, a dragon breathing fire, in still others, a beast to be slain at the end of days. The Leviathan became more than an animal. It became a theological symbol representing the untamed forces of nature, the power of God over creation, the embodiment of the ocean's unpredictability. Later writers carried the name forward. Hobbes used Leviathan as a metaphor for the state, something so vast and powerful it could hold society together. To this day, the word suggests enormity, something beyond human control. But what was the Leviathan really? Some suggest it may have been inspired by sightings of whales, the largest creatures humans had ever encountered at sea. A breaching whale rising suddenly from the depths, spraying water from its blowhole, might easily have seemed like a monster to ancient sailors. Others point to crocodiles, sharks, or giant squids as possible inspirations. Perhaps it was not one creature, but a composite, a collection of fears and encounters shaped into a single name. The Leviathan, like the Kraken, reflects how the abyss resists definition. It cannot be pinned down. It is always more than one thing, always larger, always slipping between truth and legend. And then there are the sea serpents, reported across cultures and centuries. Long, snake-like forms slithering through the waves, sometimes many meters long, sometimes coiled, sometimes rising vertically like pillars. Sailors from Europe to Asia, from Africa to the Americas told of seeing them. Skeptics argued they were misidentified whales, lines of dolphins, floating logs. Others pointed to oarfish, with their ribbon-like bodies that can stretch 8 meters or more. When one of these rare creatures washed ashore, its silver form and undulating fins seemed almost too strange to be real. In life, drifting upright in the water column, it could easily have inspired the image of a serpent gliding through the sea. Again, myth and biology blurred. The abyss supplied shapes that were unfamiliar, and humans translated them into monsters. What unites all these legends, the Kraken, the Leviathan, the sea serpents, is that they gave form to the unknown. Before maps, before sonar, before submersibles, the ocean was a blank. Sailors lived with the constant knowledge that death could come at any moment. From storms, from reefs, from currents, from the simple vastness of the water. To project monsters into that blankness was both natural and necessary. Monsters turned the abstract threat of the ocean into something more concrete, something you could name, fear, and perhaps, in story, if not in truth, defeat. But even as myths, these creatures were never entirely divorced from reality. The Kraken resembles the giant squid. The Leviathan resembles the whale. The sea serpent resembles the oarfish. Reality was stranger than myth, but myth was always close enough to reality to endure. This is why these names still resonate. We know now what giant squid look like. We have measured whales. We have filmed oarfish in their vertical drift. And yet we still say Kraken. We still say Leviathan. We still whisper about sea serpents. The abyss keeps those words alive because it keeps the mystery alive. There is another truth beneath these legends, one that says as much about us as it does about the ocean. Monsters, after all, are reflections. They reflect our fears, our limitations, our inability to control the world around us. The Kraken was a way to explain the sudden disappearance of ships. The Leviathan was a way to describe the chaos of the sea and the power of God. The serpent was a way to make sense of strange bodies glimpsed on waves. In each case, the abyss gave us shadows, and we filled them with meaning. These monsters tell us less about what actually lives in the deep, and more about how humans have always struggled with the unknown. And yet there is something fitting in that idea that truth and myth are so intertwined. The abyss itself blurs boundaries. It is both real and unreal, visible and invisible, near and distant. To explore it is to step into a place where the ordinary rules do not apply. In that sense, the Kraken and the Leviathan are not just legends. They are accurate in their way. They capture the essence of the abyss, vast, powerful, unpredictable, filled with beings that defy our expectations. When we ask what monsters still hide in the abyss, we are asking two questions at once. What real creatures have we yet to discover? And what myths still linger, waiting for confirmation, waiting for translation into biology? Perhaps one day we will find a squid larger than any seen before, a true kraken that dwarfs even our current records. Perhaps we will find creatures whose bodies twist like serpents, longer than we imagined. Perhaps the Leviathan in some form still swims, not as a dragon or a theological symbol, but as a whale larger than any yet measured, living quietly in the dark. Until then, the names remain, half memory, half prophecy. And so the truth beneath legends is this: the abyss has always been home to monsters, both real and imagined. Our ancestors named them with fear and awe. We name them now with science, but the awe remains. The Kraken, the Leviathan, the sea serpents. They are not gone. They live on, not just in stories, but in the very creatures of the deep, whose strangeness and size keep reminding us that myth and reality are closer than we think. As we continue, we see how these encounters with the abyss didn't just create stories. They changed our maps, altered our understanding of the world itself. Each sighting, each strange body pulled from the sea, forced us to redraw the boundaries of what we thought was possible. For most of human history, maps of the world were not just guides for travel. They were reflections of what we believed to exist. Blank spaces marked the limits of knowledge, and in those blank spaces, imagination thrived. The ocean, vast and unmeasured, carried more blankness than anything else, and into that emptiness we poured monsters, myths, and warnings. But as time went on, those blank spaces began to shrink. Encounters with real creatures of the abyss, strange bodies hauled to the surface or glimpsed unexpectedly at sea, forced cartographers and naturalists to redraw their charts. Bit by bit, the monsters of imagination were replaced with the monsters of reality, and our maps became less about fear and more about discovery. One of the most dramatic shifts came from the giant squid. For centuries it existed only as rumour, tied to the legend of the Kraken. Sailors told of enormous arms breaking the surface, of creatures so massive they seemed like islands. Skeptics dismissed these tales, but as more and more pieces of squid washed ashore, tentacles, beaks, entire carcasses, the truth became harder to ignore. By the 19th century, scientists began to accept that giant squid were real, and maps of the North Atlantic started to mark regions where they were likely to be found. What had once been a place of myth became a place of biology. The monster shifted from the margins of imagination into the centre of science. The discovery of hydrothermal vents was another encounter that changed everything. In 1977, when a submersible descended near the Galapagos Rift, scientists expected to see barren sea floor. Instead, they found towering chimneys spewing superheated water, surrounded by thriving ecosystems of tube worms, clams, and shrimp. These were not scattered individuals clinging to scraps of falling debris. They were communities, vast and complex, fueled not by sunlight but by chemicals from the Earth itself. Until then, maps of life had always been tied to the sun. The vents forced us to redraw those maps, to recognise that life could thrive in complete darkness, using energy from the planet instead of the sky. The abyss was no longer imagined only as a wasteland. It was a source of new possibilities. Even the simple act of measuring depth transformed our maps. For centuries, sailors used weighted ropes to gauge the seafloor, but the ropes could only reach a few hundred meters. The deeper ocean remained unmeasured, its shape a mystery. It wasn't until the invention of sonar in the early 20th century that we began to map the true contours of the abyss. What we found stunned us. The seafloor was not flat but mountainous, ridged with mid-ocean ranges scarred by trenches deeper than Everest is tall. These discoveries forced a complete rethinking of geology. The theory of plate tectonics, now central to Earth science, was confirmed in large part by these maps. In this sense, the abyss didn't just change how we drew coastlines, it changed how we understood the entire planet. Encounters with unusual animals also rewrote our sense of where the extraordinary could be found. The coelacanth, a fish thought extinct for 65 million years, was pulled from the waters off South Africa in 1938. Its discovery shocked the scientific community. Here was a living fossil, a creature that belonged to prehistory, swimming quietly in the deep. Maps of extinction had to be redrawn. The line between past and present was blurred. If the coelacanth could survive unseen for millions of years, what else might remain hidden in the abyss? Other encounters were more accidental, but no less transformative. In the 19th century, deep-sea dredging expeditions pulled up creatures no one had ever seen before. Brittle stars with curling arms, giant isopods, fish with lanterns in their heads. Each haul expanded the boundaries of known life, forcing naturalists to create new categories and redraw taxonomies. The maps of biodiversity were stretched to include forms that had once been considered impossible. And with each new species, the abyss became less an empty void and more a crowded, complex ecosystem. Even myths found themselves reshaped by these encounters. When oarfish washed ashore, their ribbon-like bodies stretching several meters, stories of sea serpents gained new credibility. Maps once decorated with drawings of coiled monsters could now be linked to real species. Similarly, sightings of whales breaching or carcasses drifting near shore explained some of the Leviathan stories. The monsters didn't vanish from the maps. They evolved, grounded in biology instead of fantasy. But perhaps the most profound change was psychological. As our maps shifted from dragons and krakens to ridges and vents, the abyss stopped being only a place of fear. It became a place of wonder, a source of discovery rather than dread. When early explorers marked "Here be monsters" on their charts, they were warning sailors away. Today, when scientists send submersibles into the deep, they go precisely because monsters might be there, not of myth, but of biology. Our relationship to the unknown transformed, and with it, our maps. Even so, the abyss still resists being fully charted. Satellite mapping has given us broad outlines of the seafloor, but much of it remains imprecise. Sonar surveys cover only small areas at a time, and vast stretches of the ocean floor are still poorly understood. Our maps are better than they once were, but they are still filled with gaps. The difference now is that instead of filling those gaps with imagination, we fill them with questions. What lives there? What shapes of land and life remain to be discovered? The blank spaces are smaller, but they are still powerful. In this way, every encounter with the abyss is a reminder that our maps are temporary. They capture what we know at a moment in time, but they are always waiting to be redrawn. When the next strange creature is pulled from the deep, when the next vent field is discovered, when the next trench is explored, our understanding will shift again. The abyss is too vast, too strange, to ever be contained on paper. Its true map is always unfinished. And so, as we think of encounters that changed our maps, we realize they're not only about the past, they're about the future. Each discovery hints at more to come. Each strange creature forces us to admit how little we know. Each redraw of the map is not an ending, but a beginning, a doorway into more questions. The abyss keeps our maps alive because it keeps our curiosity alive, and as our maps have expanded, so too have our tools. To venture into the deep today, we rely not only on ropes and weights, but on machines built to endure crushing pressure. Submersibles, drones and landers are the explorers of our time, carrying cameras and instruments into the dark. They extend our senses into places we cannot go, and with them, our maps continue to evolve. The machines that dare to go where we cannot have become as essential to the story of the abyss as the myths and the monsters themselves. For most of our history, the abyss was a place we could only imagine. Its depths were out of reach, its creatures glimpsed only when they floated dead to the surface, its landscapes hidden beneath thousands of meters of water. Human bodies are not built for such places. Our lungs collapse, our bones buckle, our senses fail. Even the strongest divers can only descend a few hundred meters before the pressure becomes lethal. Beyond that, the abyss was closed to us. If we wanted to go there, we needed help. And so, we built machines. The first attempts were humble. Weighted ropes, dredges, nets dropped into the dark and hauled back up. These were crude tools, but they were our first way of touching the abyss. The creatures they pulled up were often damaged, collapsed by the sudden change in pressure, their fragile bodies mangled beyond recognition. Still, even in these broken forms, they told us something extraordinary. Life existed where we thought it could not. Sea lilies, strange fish, brittle stars, all rose in buckets and nets, challenging our assumptions about what was possible. These machines, simple as they were, cracked open the door to the deep. But the dream was always to go ourselves, to descend into the abyss and see it with our own eyes. That dream became real in the early 20th century, when a device called the bathysphere was lowered into the deep. It was a steel sphere, small and cramped, barely large enough for 2 men to fit inside, attached to a ship by a steel cable. There was no control, no steering, no freedom, only a window, a cord, and trust in the engineers above. In 1934, William Beebe and Otis Barton used the bathysphere to descend to depths no human had ever reached before, more than 900 meters down. Through the tiny window, they saw fish with glowing lights, creatures unlike anything known at the time. Their reports captured the public's imagination, descriptions of living lanterns and strange forms drifting in the dark. The bathysphere proved what had once been only myth. The abyss was alive. From there, machines grew more ambitious. Submarines designed for war were repurposed for exploration. Research vessels carried sonar, mapping the seafloor with sound. Cameras were encased in pressure-resistant housings, lowered on cables to capture images in the dark. But the true revolution came with submersibles, machines that could carry humans safely into the deep. The most famous early triumph was the Trieste. In 1960, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh boarded this Swiss-designed bathyscaphe and descended into the Mariana Trench, the deepest known part of the ocean. At nearly 11,000 meters down, they reached the Challenger Deep, a place of unimaginable pressure. The Trieste was little more than a floating tank of gasoline for buoyancy and a steel sphere for the crew, but it worked. The 2 men spent only 20 minutes at the bottom, glimpsing flatfish and shrimp in the silt. But their achievement proved that even the deepest abyss was not beyond human reach, at least with the right machine. Since then, new generations of submersibles have pushed the frontier further. The Japanese Shinkai 6500, the French Nautil, the American Alvin, all have carried scientists into the deep, exploring hydrothermal vents, undersea volcanoes, and strange ecosystems. Alvin, in particular, became legendary when it was used to locate the wreck of the Titanic in 1985. But its most important contributions came from science. In 1977, it was Alvin that first discovered hydrothermal vent communities, changing our understanding of life on Earth forever. Each descent brought new discoveries, each dive redrawing the map of biology and geology. But even submersibles have limits. They're expensive, dangerous, and rare. To go deeper, longer, more often, We needed to send machines without people inside. Enter the age of remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. These robotic explorers are tethered to ships by cables, controlled from the surface, carrying cameras, lights, and mechanical arms. They can stay in the deep for hours or days, far beyond what a human crew could endure. With ROVs, the abyss became less remote. We could watch in real time as they filmed anglerfish hunting, jellyfish pulsing, vents spewing. For the first time, the deep was not just glimpsed but recorded, a place we could visit again and again through the eyes of machines. Even more daring are the autonomous vehicles, drones that roam freely without tethers, guided by pre-programmed routes or artificial intelligence. These machines can cover vast areas, mapping the seafloor in detail, measuring currents, collecting samples. They extend our reach far beyond the limitations of cables. With them, we are beginning to create the first true maps of the abyss, to see not just scattered glimpses but whole landscapes. Each of these machines has changed our relationship with the abyss. Before, it was myth. With nets, it became evidence. With the bathysphere, it became vision. With submersibles, it became exploration. With ROVs and drones, it is becoming familiar. And yet, it never loses its mystery. The machines show us creatures stranger than we imagined, landscapes more alien than we expected, behaviours we still cannot explain. The abyss is not diminished by exploration. It is expanded. But the machines also remind us of our limits. Every descent, every camera, every map is shaped by what the machine can do. Lights frighten some creatures, making them flee. Cameras capture only what drifts into their frame. Submersibles can visit only small areas. The abyss is too vast for even our most advanced technology to capture completely. We glimpse fragments, and we must imagine the rest. The machines extend us, but they do not replace the vastness of the unknown. Still, the courage of these machines cannot be overstated. They go where we cannot survive, endure pressures that would kill us instantly, linger in darkness for hours without faltering. They are, in a sense, the heroes of modern exploration. When we imagine the abyss today, we do so through their eyes. The shimmering plumes of vents, the slow drift of giant squid, the eerie stillness of trenches, all are images brought back by machines. Without them, the abyss would remain closed, its monsters still only legends. And perhaps the most extraordinary thing is that these machines are not done. Each year, new designs push deeper, last longer, see more. In the future, we may send swarms of drones to map entire trenches, robotic colonies to monitor ecosystems, machines small enough to drift unnoticed among the creatures themselves. The abyss may never belong to us, but through machines, we can at least witness it. Machines that dare to go where we cannot remind us of something important. Exploration is never just about reaching new places. It is about creating new ways to see. Just as telescopes open the sky, submersibles and drones have opened the sea. They transform our relationship with the unknown, turning fear into curiosity, myth into knowledge. The monsters of the abyss, once hidden in shadows, now appear on screens, not diminished but revealed in all their strange glory. And yet, even with machines, mystery remains. For every anglerfish filmed, there are dozens more creatures never seen. For every vent discovered, there are countless others hidden. The abyss is too vast, too deep, too strange to ever be fully revealed. The machines give us glimpses, but they also remind us that much remains unseen. The question, what monsters still hide in the abyss, remains open, not because we lack imagination, but because reality still outpaces us. And as the machines bring us closer, we find that some of the strangest beings are not new at all. They are old, ancient survivors from ages long past, living fossils that drift quietly in the dark. They connect the abyss not just to the present, but to Earth's deep history, reminding us that the ocean has always been a cradle of monsters. When we look at the creatures of the abyss, many of them feel new to us, strange inventions that seem to exist nowhere else. But among the glowing lures and transparent skins, there are also beings that are not new at all. They are old, impossibly old, survivors from epochs long before humans walked the earth. We call them living fossils, animals that resemble ancient ancestors almost unchanged for millions, even hundreds of millions of years. To see them is to look not just into the abyss but backward in time, into eras when the world was unrecognisable. In the deep the past lingers, alive and swimming. One of the most famous examples is the coelacanth. For decades it was known only from fossils, believed to have gone extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, some 65 million years ago. Then, in 1938, a fisherman off the coast of South Africa pulled one from the sea. Scientists were stunned. Here was a fish thought long vanished, alive and well, living in the deep waters of the Indian Ocean. Its fins, lobe-shaped and fleshy, resembled the limbs of early land vertebrates, hinting at the evolutionary step that led to amphibians and eventually to us. To see a coelacanth is to glimpse a creature that bridges the sea and the land, a living reminder of the path life once took. Another is the horseshoe crab. Though not confined to the abyss, it is ancient in its lineage, with fossils dating back nearly 500 million years. Its body, armoured and alien-looking, has changed little since then. In shallow waters it crawls slowly across the sea floor, its blue blood prized by science for its unique properties. Horseshoe crabs are not predators of the abyss, but they embody the idea that some forms are so well suited to survival that they need no major change. Evolution leaves them as they are, and they persist, indifferent to the rise and fall of ages. In the abyss proper, there are others that carry the weight of prehistory. The frilled shark, for example, with its eel-like body and a rows of needle teeth, looks more like something from the fossil record than a modern predator. It lives deep in the oceans, rarely seen, occasionally caught in nets. Its body is primitive compared to modern sharks, its movements slow, its appearance unsettling. To see it is to feel as though you're encountering a ghost from the Carboniferous seas. There are also hagfish, jawless creatures that resemble the earliest vertebrates. They secrete slime in prodigious amounts when threatened, clogging the gills of predators. Their bodies are soft and eel-like, their skulls primitive, their lifestyle scavenging. Hagfish have existed in recognisable form for more than 300 million years. In the abyss, they thrive on carcasses, wriggling into the bodies of dead whales or fish, consuming them from the inside. Their survival strategy is grotesque to us, but it has worked for ages. They are as much fossils as they are animals, proof that life's first experiments can endure. Even stranger are the stalked crinoids, also known as sea lilies. Today most crinoids drift freely as feather stars, but in the abyss stalked forms persist. They anchor themselves to the seafloor with long stems, their feathery arms reaching upward to catch drifting particles. Fossils of similar forms cover ancient seabeds, reminders that in the Paleozoic era, crinoids dominated shallow seas. Now they linger only in the deep, unchanged, their delicate forms swaying in the currents as they did hundreds of millions of years ago. They are flowers of the abyss, but flowers from another time. The concept of a living fossil is more than curiosity. It raises questions about time itself. Why do some creatures change while others remain the same? One answer is stability. The abyss is an environment that, in many ways, has changed little for millions of years. It is always dark, always cold, always under pressure. On land, climates shift, continents move, predators rise and fall, forcing constant adaptation. In the deep, conditions are stable, and stability favours persistence. A design that works does not need to change. The abyss becomes a museum, preserving ancient forms not as relics, but as living participants in the ecosystem. But there is also danger in calling them fossils. They are not frozen in time, not immune to evolution. Coelacanths, for instance, have continued to adapt in subtle ways, their genetics showing variation and change. Hagfish, too, are not identical to their ancient ancestors, though they look similar. The term living fossil captures their resemblance to the past, but not the full truth. They are not relics, they are survivors. They remind us that evolution is not a march forward, but a branching tree, with some branches persisting for vast stretches of time, and yet, the emotional power of these creatures is undeniable. To look at a coelacanth, a frilled shark, a crinoid, is to feel the weight of history pressing close. These animals swam before the rise of mammals, before the fall of dinosaurs, before forests as we know them even existed. They connect us to a world that feels impossibly distant, and yet they are alive now, sharing the same planet, inhabiting the same oceans. In their presence, time collapses. The abyss becomes a doorway, not just to mystery, but to memory. Some encounters with living fossils have changed science profoundly. The discovery of the coelacanth challenged ideas about extinction and survival. It reminded us that absence in the fossil record is not proof of disappearance. The persistence of hagfish and lampreys gave us insight into the earliest vertebrates, helping to piece together how jaws and skulls evolved. Crinoids revealed how ancient ecosystems functioned, how communities once looked when the oceans were ruled by forms now relegated to the deep. These creatures are not curiosities, they are keys to understanding life itself. The abyss holds them because the abyss protects them. Its stability, its remoteness, its constancy provide refuge. On the surface, change is constant. In the deep, change is slow, and so forms that would have been outcompeted or replaced in other environments endure here. The abyss is not just wilderness, it is archive, a place where evolution has chosen to preserve rather than erase. And still, the presence of these living fossils invites wonder about what else might remain hidden. If the coelacanth could surprise us after millions of years, what other creatures might still linger in trenches and ridges we have not yet explored? Could there be other survivors from deep time waiting in the dark, their forms unchanged since before humans even existed? Each discovery raises the possibility of more, and the abyss is vast enough to hide almost anything. The monsters of the abyss are not always new, not always products of strange modern adaptations. Sometimes they are echoes of the past, ancient designs that remind us of how long life has endured on this planet. They are monsters not because they are frightening, but because they disrupt our sense of time. They force us to see history not as something gone, but as something still alive, swimming quietly in the deep. And as we think of these living fossils, we begin to notice another truth. The abyss is not only a place of preservation, it is also a place of invention, where vents spew chemicals, where pressure bends biology, where scarcity demands creativity, new chemistries and new adaptations arise. Some of the strangest creatures are not echoes of the past, but innovations of the present, living proof that the deep is still a frontier of possibility. When we think of survival, we usually imagine teeth, claws, speed, or strength. These are the adaptations we recognize from the surface, the ones we can see and measure. But in the abyss, where the rules of life are rewritten, survival often depends on something less obvious but far more fundamental: chemistry. Down here, bodies are tested not only by predators and scarcity, but by pressure, temperature, and darkness. And to endure those conditions, life turns to the smallest building blocks, altering the very chemistry of cells to make survival possible. It is in these invisible adjustments that some of the most extraordinary monsters of the abyss are born. The first challenge is pressure. At depths of thousands of meters, the weight of the ocean crushes down with forces that would collapse human lungs and shatter fragile machinery. Pressure changes the way molecules behave, folding proteins incorrectly, disrupting membranes, and preventing enzymes from functioning. For most animals, this is lethal. But deep-sea creatures have adapted by filling their cells with stabilizing compounds. Trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, is one of the most important. It keeps proteins folded properly, preventing them from being destroyed by the immense weight. The deeper the fish, the more TMAO they carry. This is why deep-sea fish often have flesh with a stronger smell and taste. What seems pungent to us is their lifeline, the invisible armour that holds their cells together in crushing gulfs. Another challenge is temperature. At the surface, sunlight warms the ocean, but in the abyss the water hovers near freezing, barely above 0 degrees Celsius. Cold slows chemical reactions, stiffens membranes, and makes survival difficult. Many deep-sea creatures adapt by altering the composition of their cell membranes, packing them with unsaturated fats that remain fluid even in the cold. Others produce special enzymes that function at low temperatures, speeding up reactions that would otherwise grind to a halt. To us, cold is discomfort. To them, it is constant, and their bodies are built to make cold a normal part of life. But there are also places in the abyss where the opposite problem occurs. Around hydrothermal vents, temperatures can soar to hundreds of degrees Celsius. Water heated by magma gushes from chimneys, carrying chemicals that would kill most forms of life. And yet, life flourishes there, thanks to chemistry. Instead of relying on sunlight for energy, as plants do on the surface, microbes at these vents use chemosynthesis. They take chemicals like hydrogen sulfide and methane, poisonous to us, and turn them into energy. These microbes become the base of entire ecosystems, feeding worms, clams, crabs, and fish. The strange chemistry of survival here is not about enduring cold or pressure, but about turning toxins into food. Some animals even host these microbes inside their bodies. Giant tube worms, for example, have no mouths or stomachs. Instead, they house symbiotic bacteria that perform chemosynthesis within them. The worms supply the bacteria with chemicals from the vent water, and in return the bacteria supply the worms with food. This partnership is so complete that the worms could not survive without the microbes. It is a living example of chemistry reshaping biology, of life merging with life to endure where neither could alone. Beyond vents, other creatures use chemistry in unexpected ways. Some produce bioluminescence, creating light through chemical reactions. This light is not heat, not fire, but cold light, generated by molecules reacting with oxygen in carefully controlled processes. The result is lures, camouflage, communication signals, or sudden bursts of glow to scare predators. Bioluminescence is one of the most widespread adaptations in the abyss, and it is pure chemistry, an invisible trick turned visible in flashes of blue and green. Some creatures use chemistry as defense. Deep-sea squids release clouds not only of ink but of glowing mucus, confusing predators. Certain worms spit out bioluminescent slime when attacked, leaving a glowing distraction as they flee. Others produce toxins strong enough to deter larger hunters, chemical shields against the constant threat of being eaten. These defenses are invisible until they are needed, then dramatic in effect. They remind us that survival is not always about physical strength. Sometimes it is about hidden reservoirs of chemical power. The strangest chemistry may belong to the microbes that live not just around vents, but deep within the seafloor itself. In sediments kilometres below the ocean bottom, microbes survive with almost no energy at all. Some live at rates so slow that they divide only once every 1,000 years. Others metabolize simple molecules like hydrogen or carbon dioxide, surviving at the bare minimum of activity. They're not dramatic, they're invisible, almost forgotten. Yet they represent survival at the edge of possibility, life reduced to its simplest chemistry. In a way, they are the ultimate monsters of the abyss, not terrifying in appearance, but in what they reveal about endurance. And this strange chemistry has implications beyond the ocean. If life can survive without sunlight, feeding on chemicals from the earth, then perhaps life could survive elsewhere too. on moons like Europa or Enceladus, where oceans hide beneath ice, warmed not by the sun but by internal heat. The abyss becomes a model, a reminder that life is flexible, that chemistry is enough. Our search for life beyond Earth often points back to these creatures, these microbes, these worms with bacterial partners. They show us that survival does not need our rules. It needs only chemistry and time. This way of surviving can seem alien to us, but it is not alien to life itself. We are built on chemistry too. Our bodies depend on enzymes, proteins, molecules that function in narrow ranges of temperature and pressure. What feels extraordinary about deep-sea creatures is that their chemistry works in ranges far outside our own. They expand the boundaries of life, showing that the possible is wider than we thought. It is easy to look at the anglerfish or the viperfish and see the abyss as monstrous in its appearance. But the real monsters may be invisible. The molecules that hold cells together under pressure, the enzymes that function in freezing cold, the microbes that feed on poison. These are not the kinds of monsters that appear in myths, but they are just as strange, just as powerful. They are reminders that survival in the abyss is as much about chemistry as it is about teeth or size. And as strange as these adaptations are, they raise another question. If life can invent chemistries this unusual, what entire ecosystems might be hidden out there in the dark, built on rules we do not yet understand? The abyss has already given us vents with chemosynthetic life, microbes in sediments, glowing creatures powered by reactions. What else might its chemistry hold? Until we search further, the question remains open. The strange chemistry of survival is not a footnote in the story of the abyss. It is central to it. It explains how life endures crushing pressure, freezing cold, toxic heat, and endless dark. It explains why the abyss is not barren but full of monsters, each shaped not only by appearance but by molecules. And it prepares us for what comes next. Because where chemistry builds life, it builds communities. Entire ecosystems emerge in the black, sustained by invisible processes, thriving in places we once thought lifeless. When you picture the abyss, it's easy to imagine it as empty, a vast blackness stretching in all directions, broken only by the occasional drifting creature or the rare glow of bioluminescence. For a long time, that was exactly how scientists described it. A biological desert, too hostile for anything but scattered individuals. But the more we've looked, the more we've realised the deep is not barren. It is alive, sometimes teeming, sometimes quiet, but always interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand. The abyss does not hold only isolated monsters. It holds entire ecosystems, whispers of communities that thrive together in the black. The most dramatic of these are the hydrothermal vent fields. First discovered in the late 1970s, they overturned almost everything we thought we knew about life. Before then, we believed that all ecosystems were powered by sunlight. Plants captured energy from the sun, and everything else depended on that energy flowing upward through food webs. In the abyss, there is no sunlight, and yet around vent chimneys spewing superheated water, entire communities thrive. Tube worms taller than people, clams the size of footballs, crabs and shrimp swarm around in densities rivaling coral reefs. The foundation of these ecosystems is not sunlight, but chemistry. Microbes perform chemosynthesis, turning hydrogen, sulfide and other vent chemicals into energy. The result is a self-sustaining community, a world built not on light but on the Earth's internal heat. Equally surprising are the cold seeps, places where methane and other hydrocarbons leak from the seafloor. These too support rich ecosystems, with mussels, worms and microbial mats feeding entire food webs. Like vent fields, they are powered by chemosynthesis, but they are quieter, colder, less dramatic. Still, they remind us that life is flexible, that it can build communities anywhere it finds energy, no matter the source. To see them is to realise that the abyss is not a desert but a patchwork of hidden oases. But even away from vents and seeps, ecosystems emerge. Whale falls are one example. When a whale dies and its body sinks to the seafloor, it becomes an island of food in the black. Scavengers arrive first, hagfish, sharks, amphipods tearing at the flesh. Then come worms and microbes that feed on the bones themselves, breaking down the lipids within. Over decades, a single whale carcass can support hundreds of species, many found nowhere else. Whale falls are temporary ecosystems, rising and fading, but in their time they are as rich as any forest. They prove that in the abyss, community can bloom even in death. Even the drifting snow of the deep plays its part. Marine snow, tiny particles of organic matter falling from the surface, feeds countless small organisms in the mid-water zone. Copepods, krill, gelatinous animals all depend on it, and in turn they feed larger predators like fish, squid and whales. It may not look dramatic, but this slow rain of particles is the foundation of much of the abyssal food web. Without it, the deep would be far emptier. Every glowing fish, every drifting predator owes something to the constant whisper of snow. And then there are ecosystems we can barely grasp, like the microbial worlds hidden in the sediments. Kilometers below the seafloor in complete isolation, microbes persist, metabolizing slowly, surviving with almost no energy. They may not look like ecosystems to us, but they are communities nonetheless, vast in number, shaping the chemistry of the ocean from below. These invisible realms are as much part of the abyss as the glowing fish or the giant squid. What is remarkable about all these systems is how connected they are. Vents and seeps are isolated, but drifting larvae link them across oceans. Whale falls may be temporary, but they sustain species that move on to other habitats. Marine snow falls everywhere, feeding ecosystems spread across thousands of kilometers. Even in the abyss, where distance seems overwhelming, life finds ways to connect. Communities whisper to one another across gulfs, tied together by flows of energy, by migrations, by cycles of life and death. When we think of monsters in the abyss, we often imagine individuals, an anglerfish with its lure, a squid with its tentacles. But the truth is that many monsters are collective. They exist not alone, but as part of webs of life that stretch across vast distances. The abyss is not only about predators and prey, it is about networks, interdependence, balance. To see it as empty is to miss the whispers of community that echo in the black. These whispers are often fragile. Vent fields can be destroyed by geological shifts. Whale falls fade as the carcass is consumed. Cold seeps run dry. The ecosystems of the abyss are resilient in some ways, but also vulnerable. They depend on rare events, on flows of energy that can vanish. Yet even in their fragility they persist, patchwork communities thriving in places we once thought lifeless. They remind us that survival is not only about individuals, but about cooperation, about webs that tie creatures together. And they also remind us of our ignorance. Each time we discover a new ecosystem, vents in the Pacific, seeps in the Gulf of Mexico, communities around whale falls, it feels like the beginning, not the end. How many more are out there, still unseen? Could there be other oases in the black, powered by chemistries we do not yet understand? Could there be entire ecosystems waiting in trenches, living unnoticed for millions of years? The abyss is vast enough to hide them all. The whispers of these ecosystems change how we think about life. They show us that it is not rare, not fragile, not limited to easy places. Life finds ways, builds communities, flourishes in extremes. It does not need sunlight. It does not need warmth. It needs only energy and time. And given those, it creates not just individuals, but entire worlds. In the end, the monsters of the abyss are not only anglerfish or squid. They are these ecosystems themselves, vast and strange, existing where they should not. They are monsters of scale, of chemistry, of persistence, and as we listen more closely to their whispers, we begin to wonder what else remains unheard. Because if the abyss can hold communities like these, what monsters are still hiding, unseen in the black? Every time we peer into the abyss, whether with nets, submersibles, or cameras, we come back with something unexpected. Sometimes it is a creature we already knew, caught in new detail. Other times it is something entirely new, a fish with a shape we've never seen, a worm with organs arranged in ways that defy our categories, a jelly with light that ripples like liquid fire. Each discovery is a reminder that for all our maps and machines, the abyss is still mostly unknown. It is not a question of whether there are monsters we haven't met. It is a question of how many, and how strange they will be. Consider how vast the ocean is. More than 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and most of that is deep. The average depth of the ocean is more than 4 kilometers. The trenches dive far deeper still, into places so remote that fewer people have been there than have walked on the moon. We have mapped the surface of Mars more thoroughly than the seafloor of our own planet. By some estimates, more than 90% of the ocean remains unexplored. In that unexplored space, countless species live unseen, some familiar in form, others utterly alien. And the evidence is all around us. Every time a new expedition descends, new species are described. In a single dive at a hydrothermal vent, scientists might catalogue dozens of animals never before known. In a single haul of deep-sea trawl nets, strange fish, new crustaceans, unknown worms rise to the surface. Each one expands the catalogue of life, yet each one is only a fragment. For every discovery, there are thousands still hiding in the dark. Some of these monsters may be large. The giant squid was once a myth, now confirmed. The colossal squid was once rumour, now real. Who is to say there are not larger squids still, deeper and rarer, that we have not yet encountered? The ocean is vast enough to hide them. Whales live their entire lives in the sea, yet there are still species we barely understand, populations that remain mysterious. Sharks, too, still surprise us, with rare forms like the megamouth shark discovered only in the late 20th century. If such large animals could remain hidden until recently, what else might still be there? Others may be small but no less monstrous. Microbes with metabolisms unlike anything we know, viruses adapted to crushing pressure, worms with biology so unusual that they force us to rethink the boundaries of life. These may not make headlines like giant squid, but they are monsters in their own way, monsters of chemistry, of persistence, of invisibility. We tend to think of monsters as large and threatening. The abyss reminds us they can also be tiny and overlooked. Some monsters may even belong to categories we have not yet imagined. Evolution has had hundreds of millions of years to experiment in the deep, to produce forms adapted to pressure, darkness and scarcity. Why should we assume it has exhausted its creativity? Already we know of fish with transparent heads, shrimp that generate ultrasonic clicks, worms that eat bones from within. Each discovery seems stranger than the last. What might still lie below, waiting? Creatures that see without eyes, that feed without mouths, that drift in shapes we cannot yet describe. The uncertainty itself is part of the allure. Every time a camera descends, there is the chance of something extraordinary drifting past. Sometimes it is only a shadow, a shape at the edge of a light, enough to spark speculation for years. Sometimes it is a new species, small but undeniable. The abyss does not reveal its secrets easily. It offers glimpses, never the full picture. That is why the question, what monsters still hide there, remains alive, not because we lack imagination, but because the reality is almost certainly stranger. And we should remember that discovery is not always pleasant. New monsters may unsettle us, not only in appearance but in what they imply. A new predator could reshape food webs we thought we understood. A new parasite could reveal vulnerabilities we never considered. A new microbe could challenge our definitions of life itself. The abyss does not promise comfort, it promises surprise, and surprise can take many forms. It is also possible that some of the monsters we have not met yet are not entirely unknown. Sailors' stories of sea serpents, shadows larger than ships, glowing beings rising from the depths, many were dismissed as myths, but again and again fragments of truth have been found in them. The kraken turned out to be squid, the leviathan turned out to be whale. Perhaps some of the remaining legends still wait for their reveal. Perhaps one day we will lower a camera and find a creature that explains centuries of rumour, a body so strange it bridges myth and biology once more. The abyss is not done with us. For every discovery we celebrate, it holds dozens more, lurking in darkness. Some may be fragile and small, living unnoticed. Some may be vast and powerful, swimming far from our reach. Some may belong to lineages so old that they change our understanding of evolution. Each monster we have not met is a reminder that Earth is still wild, still mysterious, still full of surprises, and as we wait to meet them, we should remember that they are not waiting for us. They live their lives regardless of our knowledge. They hunt, feed, mate, die, all in silence, all in dark, unseen. They are not monsters in their own world. They're only monsters to us because they remain unknown. But sooner or later we will meet them. Our machines grow more capable each year, our maps more precise, our dives more ambitious. With each descent, the odds of discovery grow. The abyss cannot remain hidden forever. Its monsters will come into view, one by one, until what was once imagination becomes reality. And when that happens, the question will shift. Not just what monsters remain unseen, but what monsters come next. For the abyss is not static. It changes. New species evolve, old ones vanish, ecosystems shift. Even as we discover what lives there now, new monsters are being born, shaped by the same pressures and challenges that shaped those before. The monsters we still haven't met are not only waiting, they are becoming. And when we finally see them, when the light of a camera reveals a shape never known before, we will feel again the same mix of awe and unease that sailors once felt at the sight of shadows in the waves. We will recognise that the abyss is still a place of wonder, still a place where discovery feels like myth. We will remember that monsters are not only legends, not only nightmares, they are the beings that remind us how little we know. When we stare into the abyss, we are not only looking into water, pressure and darkness. We are looking into a mirror. The strange creatures, the crushing gulfs, the glowing lights, all feel alien to us at first. But the longer we observe, the more we realise that what unsettles us is not their strangeness, but what their strangeness reflects back about our own nature. The abyss teaches us, quietly and without intention, lessons about life, survival, fear, and curiosity. To see its monsters clearly is to see something of ourselves. The first lesson is about limits. Humans like to believe the world is ours to measure, to map, to explain. We build machines to fly into the sky, rockets to leave the planet, satellites to orbit and survey. We speak as if Earth is known, as if there is no wilderness left. But the abyss contradicts us. It reminds us that most of our planet lies beyond our reach, that pressure, darkness and distance keep it hidden. The fact that we know more about the surface of Mars than about the seafloor is not a failure of curiosity but a sign of scale. The abyss humbles us. It tells us that the world is larger, stranger and more mysterious than we admit. It also teaches us about resilience. Life in the deep does not flourish because it is easy. It flourishes because it adapts. Where pressure crushes steel, animals soften their bodies. Where food is scarce, predators grow enormous jaws to seize any chance. Where there is no light, creatures make their own. Where heat boils from vents, microbes thrive on poison. The abyss shows us that survival is not about ideal conditions, but about adjustment, patience, and invention. It teaches that life does not wait for kindness. It finds a way in the harshest places, and in that lesson we can see ourselves, our own history as a species, our own ability to endure harsh climates, hunger, uncertainty. We too are shaped by resilience, though we forget it in the comfort of light. Another lesson lies in fear. The abyss unsettles us because it is unseen. We fear shadows, depths, things we cannot measure. For thousands of years we filled those fears with monsters, krakens, leviathans, serpents, because it was easier to name the fear than to leave it blank. In that, the abyss reveals something deeply human, our need to explain, to narrate, to give form to the unknown. We cannot stand the void, so we clothe it in stories. The abyss has always been our partner in imagination, its darkness feeding the monsters we invent. It teaches us that fear is creative, that even dread can produce meaning. But the abyss also teaches us about wonder. For every myth that frightens sailors, there is a discovery that astonishes scientists. Tube worms at vents, coelacanths alive after millions of years, glowing fish with transparent heads. Each one expands our idea of what life can be. The abyss shows us that the world is not exhausted, that discovery is not done. It reminds us that awe is still possible, that even in an age of satellites and algorithms, mystery remains. To encounter the abyss is to feel again what our ancestors must have felt when they first looked at the stars, small, uncertain, but thrilled by the vastness of what is beyond. There is another lesson in how we respond to fragility. Many creatures of the abyss cannot survive outside their pressure and darkness. When brought to the surface, they collapse, their bodies unable to endure the change. To us they seem fragile, even pathetic, but in truth they are perfect in their own world. Their weakness is only relative to our perspective. The abyss teaches us that strength is contextual. What looks monstrous in one place looks weak in another. What looks fragile to us is resilient where it matters, and that lesson applies beyond biology. It tells us something about ourselves, about how we judge strength and weakness, how often we forget that survival always depends on context. It also teaches us patience. Life in the deep often moves slowly. Creatures drift, waiting for food, conserving energy. Some microbes divide only once every 1,000 years. In a world where speed wastes energy, patience becomes the greatest strategy. The abyss shows us that life does not always rush. Sometimes it endures by waiting. In that, it speaks to a lesson humans often ignore. That not all survival is about activity, that endurance sometimes lies in stillness. And then there is the lesson of connection. The abyss may seem remote, but it is linked to us in countless ways. The cycles of carbon, the health of fisheries, the balance of climate, all are tied to the deep ocean. Even whale falls connect the giants of the surface to the scavengers of the trenches. The abyss teaches us that separation is an illusion, that even the most distant ecosystems are part of the same planet, the same web. When we pollute, the abyss feels it. When we overfish, its balance shifts. When we imagine it as empty, we forget our own place in its network. Perhaps the most profound lesson is about perspective. The monsters of the abyss are not monsters to themselves. They are simply creatures, adapted and persistent. The fact that we see them as grotesque or frightening says more about us than about them. The abyss teaches us that our categories of beauty and ugliness, normal and monstrous, are narrow. They reflect only our small slice of experience. In the deep, those categories dissolve. Life is not beautiful or ugly. It simply is. That lesson, if we take it, frees us from our own limitations. The abyss also shows us the persistence of mystery. For all our machines and maps, for all our expeditions and cameras, most of it is still unseen. And perhaps it always will be. Perhaps there will always be creatures we never meet, ecosystems we never find, chemistries we never decode. The abyss teaches us to live with uncertainty, to accept that not everything must be revealed. It teaches us that mystery itself has value, that wonder does not always need to be resolved. And in that acceptance, we learn something about curiosity. The abyss pulls us toward it because it resists us. If it were shallow, simple, already known, we might have lost interest long ago, but its darkness, its crushing gulfs, its hidden monsters, they keep us searching, they keep us questioning. The abyss teaches us that curiosity is sustained not by answers, but by the unknown. That is why the question, what monsters still hide there, remains powerful. It is not just a scientific question, it is a human one. When we listen closely, we hear that the abyss is not only about the ocean, it is about us. It reflects our fears, our resilience, our patience, our limits, our imagination. It shows us that we are small, but not insignificant. That we are curious, but not all-knowing. That we are fragile, but also resilient. It teaches us that mystery is not an obstacle to life, but part of it. And when we return from its depths, carrying images of glowing fish or vent fields or ancient sharks, we carry more than data. We carry reminders that the world is stranger than we thought, that life is more flexible than we assumed, that imagination and reality are closer than we believed. The abyss teaches us humility, awe, and curiosity. It teaches us, in the end, what it means to be human in a world still filled with monsters. And with that lesson in mind, we surface again, ready not to end the story, but to carry it home, to close the abyss for now, while knowing it will always remain open in our imagination. We began in darkness, opening the curtain of the deep, stepping carefully into a world that most of us will never see with our own eyes. We followed the faint glow of lanterns, drifted beside giants, shivered in gulfs where pressure crushes steel, and listened to whispers of ecosystems that thrive where life should fail. Along the way, we met both monsters of imagination and monsters of reality, legends of krakens and leviathans intertwined with squids and sharks, microbes and worms, fragile and fierce. And now, as we prepare to surface, the question is not just what monsters hide in the abyss. The question is what we carry back with us, what the abyss leaves in us after the lights dim and the story closes. To close the abyss is not to seal it away. It will remain, vast and unmoved, a darkness greater than any story. What we close is our encounter with it, the time we have spent imagining its creatures, tracing its mysteries, listening to its echoes. We close the book, but not the ocean. The ocean continues whether we look or not. The monsters continue, drifting, glowing, feeding, enduring, whether we imagine them or not. What we bring home is not them, but the wonder they inspire. That wonder is a kind of light in itself. For thousands of years the abyss was feared. It was marked on maps with warnings, filled with serpents, treated as a place beyond human reach. Now we know more and we know better, but the wonder has not gone. If anything, it has grown. To learn that fish glow with living lanterns is no less magical than believing in sea serpents. To learn that microbes eat poison at vents is no less astonishing than imagining dragons. The truth has not replaced the myth. It has expanded it. The monsters we found are as strange as the monsters we invented, and in that there is a lesson about how we live with mystery. We do not need to choose between myth and science, between imagination and reality. The abyss shows us that both have their place. The myths reveal our fears and dreams. The science reveals the creatures themselves. Together they remind us that the unknown is not empty. It is alive in stories and in bodies, in ideas and in ecosystems. The abyss is not simply a place. It is a relationship between us and what lies beyond us. To carry that relationship home is to change how we see the world above. The next time you look at the sea, you might not see only waves. You might see the depth beneath them, the pressure, the darkness, the monsters moving unseen. The abyss is always there, hidden under the surface of ordinary life. Its presence makes the ocean larger, but it also makes the world larger. It reminds us that what we see is only a fraction, that below every calm horizon there is an infinity of strangeness. The monsters themselves, whether giant squid or transparent hunters or fragile worms, also come home with us in memory. They remind us that survival can take forms we would never guess, that beauty and terror are often the same thing seen from different angles, that strength can look like fragility, and fragility can conceal endurance. These are lessons we can carry, not just about the ocean, but about ourselves and each other. The abyss is a teacher, though it does not intend to teach. By existing, it offers perspective. By enduring, it offers humility. And then there is the simple gift of awe. In daily life, it is easy to forget that the world is extraordinary. Work, routine, noise, screens, they shrink our sense of scale. The abyss undoes that shrinking. It restores scale. It reminds us of vastness, of pressure and distance and time beyond measure. It makes us feel small, but not in despair. Small in wonder, small in a way that opens us rather than closes us. To carry that feeling home is to carry a kind of renewal, a reminder that life is bigger than we imagine, stranger than we plan, richer than we control. Closing the abyss does not mean losing it. It means remembering that it is always there, waiting, whether or not we descend. The next expedition, the next submersible, the next unexpected carcass washed ashore, these will open it again, reminding us that mystery is endless. What we close tonight here is simply this conversation with it. The abyss itself remains open and always will. As we surface, imagine the darkness falling away, the pressure easing, the water brightening until light filters back. Imagine carrying with you the glow of lanternfish, the arms of squid, the whispers of vents, the slow patience of sharks older than centuries. Imagine feeling those things not as distant curiosities, but as part of your own world, your own story. Because they are. We share this planet with them. Their existence is part of our existence. Their strangeness is part of our home. So tonight, as we close the abyss, we do not close it with fear. We close it with gratitude. Gratitude that such a place exists. Gratitude that such creatures endure. Gratitude that in a world often so familiar, there are still places that defy us, still questions that remain unanswered, still monsters we have not met. Gratitude that mystery survives. And maybe, if you carry that feeling with you, the abyss will not feel so far away. Maybe you'll hear its echo in the sound of the waves, or see its hint in the stars overhead, or feel its weight in the silence between things. The abyss is not just below the sea. It is in every unknown, every question, every part of life that waits to be explored. To carry the abyss home is to live with curiosity alive. And so, as we close, I'll leave you with this. The abyss is vast, the monsters are many, and most of them still wait unseen. But we are part of the same story. We too live on this planet of dark oceans and hidden gulfs. We too are creatures of survival and imagination. And maybe that is the greatest wonder of all, that in looking into the abyss, we are also looking into ourselves.